We should have struck rather than start.
At Bayview, they're drilling
Correct,
in the middle of the park.
correct. Those are those piezometers.
Was that for the flow?
Yeah, for the flow.
For the phone.
Yeah.
So only names that mean nothing. I don't care if they're piezometers or odometer,
Pizza meters.
pizza meters. Okay,
Close enough.
but why? Is that a normal procedure?
Correct. Sometimes they just end up having to replace and relocate them, you know, but usually they get, I mean, I can't think of the last time they had to move the monitoring well. And so that's basically what it is.
Okay, because I figured it was something to do with the plume,
Correct.
but I didn't know to what extent. So it's just a matter of putting in a hole that they can
Monitor.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Not quite the way Channel 13 had it, but that's.
Well, I don't watch the news.
Good.
There's too many PIOs on it.
Okay, well, let's just go ahead and proceed. Chad, I know that this is pretty much going to be your show tonight.
Brandon's going to be here tag team moderate income housing report.
Very good.
First item, if I remember right, is the Jenkins property. That's, if I remember that correctly, on the agenda in front of me, but
Yeah.
we'll start there.
I'll let you go ahead and start.
Yeah,
Bring us up to date again.
just real quick on a couple of these items. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that Brandon, this will be his last time here at City Council with us. He has accepted a position with Ogden City.
Whoa.
Are you what?
Whoa. I didn't know he was gonna throw that out there.
Sorry, pretty sad.
So what's he doing here?
He's going to knock it out of the park tonight. That's all.
Okay, so
There you go.
you're putting him up there, so, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because if we
Great, now I'm
lose
gonna
him,
get
it's.
tomatoes thrown at me or
Soccer's
cupcakes.
fault.
Go to Hooper.
There you go.
Congratulations.
With
Well,
that,
darn it.
yeah, very, very sad, but we're happy for
Tough
him.
one.
This is, the item before us tonight is an annexation agreement. It's an annexation rezone request from A to R110 PRED. So there's a few pieces to this puzzle because a good portion of the property is outside city limits. There will be a requirement to annex this property as part of your motion. We're going to also be looking at an approval of an annexation agreement along with the rezone that goes with this. Whenever we bring agricultural property into the city,
Welcome. Sorry. I couldn't resist. I'm glad the train passed.
Still stopped when I went over the hard way.
Okay, so I'm safe.
Yeah.
so this requires, again, just those three pieces to the puzzle. Whenever we bring property in from the county, it automatically goes to an agricultural zone, so we're changing that from ag to R110 PRED if the council so chooses tonight. So the piece of the property that's outside of the city, again, is about just under 15 and a half acres, or about 18 total acres. You can see a little piece of that that's already within the city limits here and here. This yellow outline portion is the part that's outside of the city limits. You can see some of the surrounding uses. Of course, this is 3200 West, over here to the west side of the left side of the picture. Gentile right up here at the top. Our future 2700 West extension is right over in this area. And then the West Davis corridor, of course, is down here to the south. A couple of just real brief overview of the proposal. I want to say one of the things that was really important to us in this particular project was with our PRED ordinance changes that occurred back in 2019, just really right after the general plan. The emphasis from the council was really to look at these PREDs and to make sure that we have meaningful, usable open space rather than having pieces that were kind of left over or places that couldn't be really used, to have meaningful, usable open space. So Weston worked very closely with the applicants team over several months to come up with a plan that really did that. So we've got open spaces that are centrally located, that are easily accessible by the residents of the subdivision, that are big enough to be usable, that have some good amenity space. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But that was really the focus of that effort, was to make sure that we had a PRED that had that meaningful open space. The actual PRED itself, we have a total of 91 units that are proposed. Of those, 67 are single family, and we have 24 townhome units, which are right up here in the top of the picture. Now in this case, your left is north, so up is not north in this case, but this is east over here. So on the east side of the development, you've got these townhomes that have a really nice open space area between the townhomes that will be a nice, again, amenity for the folks that live there, and it's well designed, and we really appreciate the efforts that have been put in there. We've also got connections that occur through, again, meaningful open space areas that are large enough that it can be, actually considered to be open space. This development also, well, I'm going to get to this picture in just a minute. I'll get back there. So this is some of the amenity space. One of the things that occurred during the planning commission process is we did a little bit of a trade on the design. So in our development agreement right now, we talk about a sand volleyball court. That's been replaced by a couple of different changes that I'll just talk about. And these changes were talked about with the planning commission. But this is a more of an agricultural type of a feel, a little playground, so a little bit of an upgrade from the standard playground. You can kind of see some of the concepts there, some fun kind of agricultural themed playground equipment. Community garden, which would be located, back the other direction for just a minute. Community garden area that would be located right here. That's again something that was changed during the planning commission review process of the development. So that's another change to that.
What's the building in there, or the square?
Which one?
Community garden.
That'd be like a raised bed box.
Or is that the community garden?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's
I'm
just a
sorry.
representation of where that would fall on the
Oh,
lot.
okay.
So there's also a pickleball court right over here in the corner. Don't want to miss that as well. A nice interior trail system. And as we look at these types of trail systems, we want to have things that can be accessed that are also meaningful and big enough to actually be open space areas. Sometimes in the past, we would see trails that were so small and so tucked away that they weren't really able to be used. But this is a large area that can be used. It's a little bit over 20%. Our code requires a minimum of 20% open space. It's a little bit over 20% with this design that's been put together. Again, single family along the perimeter with that townhome development portion there along the east portion. Go through just some of the elevations. These are some of the typical elevations that were submitted for the homes that would go in there. Single family homes here, and then we'll get to the townhomes. This would be a typical elevation of the types of townhomes that you would see built there on that east property line. So just to really get into some of the details from the planning commission, this is a development that was reviewed a couple of times by the planning commission during a couple of meetings. There was an issue that was brought up by one of the adjacent property owners. We have to the south is the existing perennial favorites nursery use, and the owner of that property did come to both of those planning commission meetings with concerns about buffering along that south property line and making sure that there were adequate mitigation measures that have taken place there. Just to give you an idea of what our usual mitigation is when we have bordering agricultural property in these cases, we have a requirement for, in the development agreement and the code, we have a requirement for a notice to be placed on the plat recorded against the properties that notify owners of properties in that subdivision that there's an existing agricultural use. Here it is. This is the language from the code that talks about that agricultural operation. This is required for any property, any subdivision within 300 feet of an agricultural operation, and that's use or zoning. So this, again, it puts on notice that there would be an agricultural use that would also have some impacts. There would be, you can see that the code gets very explicit in the language. It's annoyance or inconvenience. That's pretty strong language that people are aware of when they buy this property, that there's a notice. As we looked at this property, one of the things that was requested by the adjacent property owners is that there would be a larger buffer along that south property line. And that could have been a variety of things. The thing that was kind of suggested in the meeting was a trail system that would provide a little bit more space between the developments that could provide a little bit of a buffer. Our code says that to count that trail towards minimum open space requirements for the code, it has to be at least 18 feet wide corridor. The trail itself would be narrower, but there'd have to be at least an 18-foot wide corridor. So the planning commission asked us to take a look at that, put the pause button on for several weeks and said, go take a look at this. Staff would work with the applicant to see if there's a way to look at that and see if that's an option. As we looked at that particular idea, as we looked at designs that came forward, we had some concerns about that. And really the concerns boiled down to, again, that direction, which we think is good direction from the council, that we create these meaningful open spaces. With that area there behind these homes, that trail would have been bordered on both sides by fences. There would have been a required fence along the south property line, and we would anticipate that those property owners would build a fence to provide themselves with privacy from that trail along their interior property lines. And we started to look at, more of a corridor that really didn't lead anywhere, that didn't have any meaningful connections to other open space within the development. And that became, not exactly like this. I'll go back to that picture. I'm sorry to flip around so much, but not exactly like this. Would have been a little wider, but it would have had that same effect of fences on both sides and having that trail corridor run between without really leading to any other open space. We had concerns about that. Our direction from the council, good direction, was to try to make sure that our open spaces in these PREDs actually function. And we also had concerns. You'll remember, those of you that were on the council, from some of these PREDs where we've had trails that go along the backside of people's properties. When it's not leading to another open space, it becomes attractive to folks that want to, do a lot of variety of things back there, and we get concerns from adjacent neighbors and adjacent residents of those developments. So those were our concerns, and I want to make sure that it's very clear that that's staff's concerns, and that after staff reviewed that proposal, we did go back to the applicant and say we really feel like the mitigation measures that are in our code are sufficient. In addition to that, we had the opportunity, because there was enough space there, to provide some additional lot depth. So the standard setback for a home in an agricultural zone from an adjacent property line is 30 feet. So we were able to work with the applicant to provide an additional depth to those lots to make sure that each of those homes would be at least 30 feet, which is the required setback for a home built in an agricultural parcel adjacent to another parcel. Now, again, besides that notice that's required by code, we also, through the development agreement and code, have a solid vinyl fence that's required along that rear property line, that south property line there, for those homes to provide additional buffer. The applicant has also agreed to record not only on the plat, but on each of those individual lots, an individual deed declaration to make sure that those people have additional notice that they are moving next to an adjacent agricultural operation. The Planning Commission took that one step further and said that in addition to the language in our code, they wanted to have specific language related to hours of operation, lighting, things that would be expected impacts from this particular adjacent use. So that's part of the recommendation that they gave to you, or forwarded to you, was that we have that additional language added to that deed declaration, which, if you should choose to approve this, would be part of our condition or part of the approval tonight. A couple other things real quick, and then I'll be quiet. Looking at this particular use of the adjacent use, we had a lot of questions about, well, is this sufficient for that mitigation? And from staff's perspective and from our point of view, this is not an uncommon occurrence for us to have residential development against existing agricultural operations. In some ways, this particular use provides even better notice than many of our agricultural operations out there. Lots of times we have people move close to an agricultural operation that happens to be in the growing stage, and later on they discover that there's going to be tractors and things that are going to come early in the morning or late at night and operate there and create noise and dust and smells, and that doesn't occur until after they've been in the home for some time. In this case, this is something that will be very apparent to anyone that moves in these homes. There's an adjacent operation there that they have that visual notice besides all the notices that we've talked about. We are very sensitive to the issue and do understand the concern. We do feel, though, that the mitigations that are already provided for in code are adequate, and that the impacts from providing a buffer along that would be not in keeping with what our direction's been on these PREDs, to make sure that our open space is provided in central locations, again, easily accessible, large enough to be meaningful to the residents. And with that, the Planning Commission did review it and unanimously recommended approval with that little addition for that additional language on the deed declaration. So be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Who puts up the fence?
The developer would have to build that fence.
Okay, not the farm.
No.
Okay.
The developer has to build the fence.
Secondly, you say mitigation. I understand what mitigation is, but I don't know what you're mitigating.
There's going to be impacts from that use. We have an existing use. You're going to have vehicles driving by. They have an access road on this side. You'll have vehicles driving by from time to time on that access road. They have greenhouses there that do have some fans. We have been out there to the site. They do run. Our recommendation is that they're not, the impacts from those fans are not so much that they need to have additional buffer, that, that having that fence there and the buffer that exists there is enough.
You mentioned time once. I mean, if you're a farmer, time is, sometimes you're out late,
Sure.
it's gonna get wet, and so we're not curtailing any of that, are we?
No, we're not. What we're doing actually is providing the notice to the new homeowners that they are buying into this when they buy
Right,
this
they need to
We're
know
not-
that there's
Yeah.
gonna be issues.
And if someone was to call the city and say that, I have a complaint, we'd say, well, respectfully, you had noticed that you're moving next to an agricultural use, yeah.
So we're not really changing anything of the farmer.
No,
I mean, he has, do whatever he's done, except there will be a fence there.
there'll be a fence and homes next
Yeah.
door, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, Chad, I know that the ordinance says 300 feet as far as the notice, so realistically, are you gonna come into the second street there and notify those? Would that
Well, so
attach
the
all those
plat,
homes as
the
well?
plat, that requirement is recorded on the plat, so it's whenever this is within 300 feet, so
Right.
that entire plat gets the notice on it. Those that get the deed declaration, again, that's the extra part that the commission added, that's just this piece right here along the south. So the requirement for code is that the plat has that note recorded on it. This would be in addition to that for those first tier of lots right there.
Just the ones that back it up.
Those 9 lots,
Yeah.
yeah, Joy. So those 9 lots will get like an extra, hey, this is a big deal.
Right.
And then everybody else will have the same notice that you get when you're next to agricultural uses.
And that's on all the plats we have that are next to an agricultural use
No.
throughout the city, lots of them.
Okay, tell me how they get it. Excuse my ignorance, but, there's a lot of things that are written that if you don't go find them, you don't know. So if I buy a house there, how am I gonna, is it my responsibility to look on my land and see what's going on?
Yeah, there would be, there's a process you go through whenever you buy a home, you go through
Okay, so
disclosures.
you have to sign something that
That's
says
right.
When you buy it.
supposedly I've read
That
this.
you read those things, yeah.
Okay.
So
No,
it'd be
that's-
recorded on the plat.
That's okay, because at least they have opportunity to have read it if they've signed it.
And I think one thing that's unique about this particular use again is that it's not like moving next to a, cornfield that's in the
Yeah.
middle of the summer where you don't know
Sure.
there's gonna be a tractor coming through later. Those greenhouses are
Yeah,
there. So
they're there and they're not, but it's, sometimes you move into places and then find out, oh,
Yeah.
they're putting up a pig farm, no one told me, so that, in and of it, that's fine. If they gotta sign off some paper when they do their loan, if you don't read it, it's your own fault.
Okay. I know there's a lot of other questions. Has any other questions?
Well, first, any other communication with perennial favorites after you made the changes, their opinion on that?
Yeah, I did have a chance to talk with Preston on the phone just a little while ago. I think it was about a week and a half ago. And this is one of those things where I think reasonable people can disagree. I think he definitely still feels that he would like to have that buffer there. I had a chance to explain our position on it. He had an additional chance to explain his thoughts. And he is concerned. We understand those concerns. They're valid concerns. In this case, we do feel like, though, that the measures that are being taken are enough to provide, first of all, notice, and that we can understand the concern about, potential complaints or whatever might be the case from those neighboring property owners. But again, we feel like this is something that's pretty common. We have farm lots throughout the city. We build next to these agricultural operations routinely, and we found that we don't get that many complaints, really. Most people are aware, and they move next to them, that they've got an adjacent use. Sometimes we'll even have people tell us that they love to watch the tractors go by as they're doing their thing behind them. And so it just depends on the person, obviously, but we do feel like this is adequate.
And I've not been down to look exactly at it, but would be a fence. And I'm going south now, and then a road.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And then the
Greenhouse.
greenhouse.
Yep.
So there's is there any real farming going on
Just
next
the
to those
greenhouses.
houses?
Yeah,
The greenhouses,
Yeah.
that's not farming.
Yeah.
Okay, Yeah, that's
But-
just ag.
But he's moving his product around on that north side, which would back up to where those folks live, and I think that's his concern, because he is running, small tractors, SUVs.
Yeah.
Four-wheelers are probably the biggest noise,
Right, yes.
so that's where a lot of the noise is coming from.
And so he's concerned about
The neighbors complaining on,
contacting the city.
yeah.
Covers it, but there's that provision, huh? That's a good one.
So there's additional protections, and Gary, maybe you can back me up or not, in the city's nuisance ordinance, where it says agriculture, if you are, you're an agriculture operation and the things you are doing are acceptable agriculture practices, then you do not qualify as a nuisance.
Okay.
So one concern I have is with nursery, there's a lot of lighting at night. Plants need a certain amount of light per day to produce, to grow. That's an acceptable practice in nursery and agriculture. But there's part of our code also says lighting on one property should not go onto another crossing property line. So,
Yeah, agriculture is the exception to that,
okay,
to any of those nuisance type
through
statutes.
that nuisance ordinance.
And in fact, Steve reminded me that there's just a general principle of law that we learned about, and that is when you move to a nuisance, you're the one that makes that decision to move to a place. You're making a conscious decision. It's not like the nuisance comes out. And it's not really a nuisance, but the negative use, the negative impacts come to you afterwards.
Come with it.
Yeah.
Additionally, again, the planning commission wants to have a little bit more teeth in that deed declaration, so they asked us specifically to say that there would be lighting, that would occur as associated with the greenhouses. So we'll make sure that's in the notice as that goes forward.
I have a couple questions. One, I was here for the first planning commission meeting when Mr. Cox got up. And
Yeah.
one of the things that he said was he was concerned that he was could be squeezed out of business. I don't know if he has still had that same thought, or if that's been, you can't think for him, but, because he's got, on the other side, you've got the West Davis Highway and stuff happening there. And then it just feels like he's gonna be surrounded.
Yeah, I think
I'm not
things
sure
are
what to do
changing.
about that, but
Things are changing rapidly out there. When the interchange opens up, there'll be some big changes in land use from that area, and that's hard. I would say, to answer your question, that his opinions haven't changed. He's still got the same concerns based on our last conversation. So, and I appreciate him. That West Davis corridor is coming along, and that interchange will open, and it will change things drastically in that area for sure.
But you won't change his access.
No.
So he's gonna have the same setup he has now, except for like anybody else in Layton. There's just more cars and trucks. But it's not gonna do something where you can't get a big rig in or
It'll be the
something like
same
that.
access as what he has.
Same
now.
access, okay.
His potential for growth is diminishing, is what I think is
Oh,
his
for
biggest
growth.
fear. Yeah, he, with this going in, and who knows what will go to the property to
Right.
the east, and now we know, who knows where
Well, that's
the
like
status
anybody.
is, that's,
Yeah.
I
you
think
don't
that's
buy it.
that's really the concern.
And I guess the other part is that dog park is that, you're probably gonna tell me that's not what we're talking about tonight, but that just grass with a fence around it.
We are talking about it. Yeah, that's part of the development plan. So can you zoom in on that point or give me the?
The reason I say that is one of the, we've had discussions in the past about dog parks in Layton, and one of the things the Parks and Rec talks about is that you just can't have grass. What dogs doing grass messes up the grass, and you've gotta
Kill them.
Yeah, and you've got to shift things, and if there's just one spot, we were just, I'm sure you can multitask, Chad, but we're just in Seattle and in other places, it's probably the same, where you've got dog parks that are mostly cement with some artificial grass, and you can clean it, and it's not just a strip of turf.
Yeah. I don't know that we've specified turf on there. Maybe our applicants here, maybe you guys could speak to what your plans are for the
Remember, this is an HOA.
Well, you're driving into it, you're just like driving like right.
What's next to it, north
There's a home,
of the dog park?
there's a home there, yeah, existing home.
A home?
Wow.
A home?
Yeah, there's a single family home right there and then a big deep, it's a deep lot.
Yeah.
So the home sits up here, then that dog park runs along the entire.
Oh, okay. Because it's gonna be noisy. And dog parks aren't ag.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I wouldn't want a dog park next to my house. And not that I don't like dogs, I don't like noise. I mean, you know, I mean, that's, to me, there's more stink there than there is.
My concern is just the turf, I'm not, if you could.
Yeah.
They've got some columnar trees, you can see called out along that property line. There'll be a fence, of course. Maybe the applicant can address the turf question and not.
Yeah, for sure. So Dave, to your point, there, on the border of the entire property, there'll be a 6-foot privacy fence, including on Spencer's
Oh,
property. as
okay,
well as-
so even along that.
So even
that
along
part.
that piece, there'll be a
Okay.
6-foot privacy fence, and then there'll be an additional fence for just the dog park.
To keep the dogs,
That would be
yeah,
a chain
right.
link fence, yeah. So I think hopefully that concern is addressed. The sound, it can't be mitigated.
No, you can't address sound because it'll go over. a fence.
Right, and right now, I mean, agricultural operations, obviously it's a
Yeah.
different
No,
animal,
it's-
but there's sound there, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
no,
you've got
I get it,
horses.
you know, but
Yeah.
my other concern is putting two fences together is probably the dumbest thing you can do. Now, I say that because no matter what you do, there's a space between them.
Right,
And all they do is grow weeds and you can't get to them, you know? And so my suggestion, if I can make suggestions, just make sure it's cement.
in between
You
those
know,
two.
between, I mean, the fence can be closed, but make sure there's nothing where.
That would be one alternative, Dave. I guess in our mind, the other alternative would be just terminate that fence into the 6-foot privacy fence. So that would be the other alternative, and that way you'd create a little bit more space for the actual dog park. And I think that might be a good solution as well, because I agree with you, putting two fences up doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I don't know.
Is that the
which
vinyl
one to
fence
get
as
rid
well?
of.
Yeah, so
Privacy.
so to Dave's point, there's a vinyl fence that would be right on the property boundary
Right.
between the property owner to the north. Then we'd have, and I don't know exactly what that's, so the whole width, and that gets to the other council member's question, the whole width there is 33 feet. So it's not like it's a 5-foot strip with 6-foot fences on both sides that never sees the
Yeah,
light of
right.
day. That's a 30-foot strip of grass, and if we sprinkle it right, and we manage it and maintain it, there's enough space in there where those dogs aren't going to just totally trash that turf. Obviously, their bowel movements will have an impact on that grass, but we will maintain that, make sure that looks good. That's going to be one of the entrances into our community, so we're going to be wanting to make sure that's right. But from my perspective, yeah, we'll have trees for shade, and we'll. I think
Well, if you're gonna put, will the trees be inside the park?
the trees will be on both in the park strip as well as within the park. We've got that as a kind of a screen and buffer to the
Right,
property.
no,
between
and
them.
that's a good idea, yeah. My
Dog
only,
parks become kind of like a gathering place for dog owners. It's definitely a social gathering, and
Well,
I'm sure that
I-
this will be well used, and I
We-
think that's their
we-
concern.
We built one, no, Joy, I agree with you. We built one up in South Weber
Uh-huh.
that is used almost nonstop by it feels like 3 or 4 cities kind of come and gather and.
I was gonna say, I don't care if you put HOA or machine gun towers, you're gonna have dog people from all over
Using that.
use.
Well,
That's
we
just
we definitely have a void in this city,
Yeah.
and so myself, I appreciate you stepping up and asking.
Yeah. No,
We
Just-
definitely need it.
And if you've done it before, that's good, because now you know.
we know.
You know the problems.
Yep.
And usually, in the beginning, I come from parks and recreation, so in the beginning, when they did dog parks, they didn't put a lot of thought to it.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, they were tearing it out or down. The parks didn't last. And so that being an entranceway to your place, that's good because it'll make sure that
We're motivated.
that it looks nice.
Our HOA will be motivated, there'll be
Yeah.
benches there, there'll be shade there,
Yeah.
there'll be, you know,
Nice.
fence structures that will be kind of, you know, secure, but in and out, you can come in and out easily.
Yeah,
It
and I
won't be-
like the idea that their house is to the other side of the property.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not in your backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right next to your house.
Yeah.
So,
And I guess, while I'm just kind of talking, I just wanted to make sure too that you knew that we met with Preston, we've met with Preston several
Okay.
times. I know he's been talking to a lot of the city folks.
Sure.
We've tried to understand Preston's concerns and address those to the extent that we can. Chad pointed out the specific language on those 9 lots that's to the south, but I just wanted to read it. It says the agricultural uses at the very end, it says of the typical statement that's recorded on the deed, but it says the agricultural uses and activities may include, this is the language that Planning Commission wanted to add. Sorry, I keep interrupting. But it says the agricultural uses and activities may include, but not be limited to, early, morning, daytime, and nighttime lighting, noise, and dust. And so that's been something that's been a big concern. Just one more thought, and I know, and Preston will be here, he'll express his concerns. The solution that he feels to be pushing for, feels like he wants to see on there is just, it's a trail. And so from our perspective, what we tried to do is we tried to bump that road and correspondingly the homes further north. So essentially, those homes will be located where the homes are located, and there would be enough space to add that trail. But from my perspective, I guess I would rather have that, if I'm those residents, I would rather have that space in my backyard. The distance is the buffer from Spencer's operations. And like you said, there's the fence, the road,
Right.
then his facility. So I guess I'm not entirely sure what 2 fences there. Again, the space is the same, the house, Spencer's facility. So I don't know what 2 6-foot fences does to further protect him and a trail
Yeah.
versus putting that in somebody's backyard where they'll be putting trees and other things to kind of screen it.
Space-wise, you're still the same.
Space-wise, it's still the same, and so from our perspective, it's like, those people will probably have drapes, lights are a problem, but it's no more than any park in Layton City, people that live next to the park, so we've tried to mitigate that and tried to provide language in there and tried to do what we could to help Spencer, and I like, frankly, the city's position to say, I don't think putting just kind of an alleyway of a trail through there is gonna add that much protection to Spencer's operations, but.
Yeah.
Would it be tough, and I don't know if it would be beneficial, but to add the word smells to that as well?
Yeah.
I think it'd be helpful.
Good point.
And that's how our nuisance ordinance is worded, so it adds that as well,
Yeah, that would be great,
among others.
that would be great.
But just think of the
Any
lavender, with the lavender's growing right there, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let me bring this meeting back to the actual council here. That's typically what we do, but that's all right. Council, the rest of you, do you have any more questions? Now, or concerns? So we make sure we address them all while we can.
I have one question, just for clarity. I counted the lots here, and it
Yeah, I
wasn't
didn't-
9. So which 9 lots are you referring to on this?
It's these 7, and then there's 2 more up top. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You're right, I'm sorry, there's 11. 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You're
Yeah,
right.
and we, in our condition, it doesn't specify a number, it just says along the south property lines.
Okay.
So for any future development going on eastward, we need to continue this is basically what will end up happening so that we're protected.
Is that as far east as he owns?
Yes,
I'm not.
Oh,
as Mr. Jenkins
No,
says,
it's
yes.
Preston.
Jenkins.
Is
No,
it
Preston
No,
goes.
his goes further,
Does he go farther east?
he does.
Okay.
And south.
Mhm.
Well, south, yeah, that's.
So anybody who encompasses.
Here's
it,
the
we're
property
gonna
boundary, you can see those
Oh, I
extend.
see. Yeah, so he's still got it.
I might take it away from the council again, because they might have to answer, but is there an elevation change between Preston's and where the fence will be, or the homes to the north?
It's pretty flat.
Is it pretty, okay.
Okay, I think we've got this topic handled. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the general plan amendment.
I'm gonna do just a very, very brief preamble here and then turn the time over to Brandon for discussion about this, but just to let you know what this is, it is a general plan amendment because the moderate income housing plan is part of our general plan, but this is very, very limited in scope. Back in the last legislative session, there was, and Brandon will explain this in more detail, there was specific legislation passed that requires us to make some changes to our general plan, to the moderate income housing plan element. The changes are very, very minor in nature. We'll talk through a little bit, but really they come down to the way that the plan is organized. The state has told us we need to organize it in a certain way, and Brandon will talk about that. And then adding a couple of strategies. I think really just one required strategy, and then we'll talk about some of the other ones and how we're already kind of doing some of those. But I just want to make sure we understand what's going on. It's not a wholesale change. The moderate income housing plan was adopted 3 years ago. We're still going to keep that going. We've done this as an addendum because we anticipate needing to revisit that plan again in 2 years. So we're trying to surgically go in and make the changes that the state requires, anticipating that in a couple of years we're going to go back through and re-look at our moderate income housing plan anyway, which we're required to do every 5 years. So with that being said, I'll turn the time over to Brandon. Some details.
So Chad introduced the topic. So there were changes, as he said, during the 2022 legislative session to requirements for cities. We are a second-class city based on our population, and so we are required to meet specific requirements by the state. So what is moderate income housing? So just really quick, so moderate income housing is housing that is can be rented or purchased by a family or a household that earns 80% of the area median income within our county. So and that would be in Davis County. So real quick, in Davis County, the area median income is $87,570. That's based on 2020 numbers. So a household that's considered moderate income household makes roughly $70,000 a year, which means as far as their income goes, HUD recommends that households don't spend more than 30% of their gross income on housing. And I did a little bit of research, and so based on the numbers that I came up with, in Layton, you can rent a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bath, for $1,532, and that's only for the rent. So that doesn't include utilities and other housing costs.
Did you check more than one place?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I just say that because you can find cheap.
Yeah, it's an average. So there's definitely more that are above that price.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so the housing costs could be upwards to $2,000, which for a household that makes around the area median income or less than area median income could be considered what's called cost burden. So just go into detail a little bit. So Senate Bill 34 was approved in 2019, and it had 2 requirements. The first requirement was that cities are required to adopt a moderate income planning element, and then the other requirement was to report on how they were complying and providing inventory of moderate income housing. So the update to Senate Bill 34 happened this year in the 2022 legislative session, and it's House Bill 462. So these are the changes with House Bill 462. So there were some updates to what is required in the general plan amendment, and Chad talked about some of those. And they added a few new strategies that cities can adopt as part of their moderate income housing plan. And then the other new portion is cities are required to have an implementation plan. So not only do they have to have strategies, but they also have to describe how they're going to accomplish those and when they're going to accomplish them. Number 4 talks about stationary planning. So any city that has transit stations, so either BRT or a track station or a front runner station, they have specific requirements, and they have to adopt a stationary plan by 2025. And basically the stationary plan is the area within a half-mile radius of the station. So that is required for any city that has that type of transit station in their city. And there were updates made to the annual reporting requirements. And cities that follow through and are in compliance with the new state codes also have some incentives. And if they don't qualify or don't meet the requirements, they also have restrictions as far as receiving funding. So I'll go through each of these pretty quick. So Layton City, because we have what they call a fixed, I just missed the term. Fixed guideway transit station. We're required to have 4. Cities that don't have transit stations such as that are only required to have 3 strategies. So out of the 24 strategies that the state allows us to pick from, we're required to select 4. One of those strategies must be a stationary plan. So we will be required to develop a stationary plan as well as adopt it by 2025. Yep.
Brandon, the BRT, is that what's being built in Ogden right now?
Right.
Is that what that is?
Well, so the BRT, it only applies if they have dedicated lane, so it's that fixed guideway. If it's a BRT station that doesn't have a dedicated lane, then they're not required to do the stationary plan. But cities that have multiple stations, if they have more than 4, they're allowed to do 4 basically in each phase. And cities can apply for there's technical assistance that will be provided. And so cities can apply for that each year as they work on those. So, yep.
Question.
Yep.
So if you go back one slide, you said Layton is required to select 4 strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading somewhere in our background that there were 6 strategies.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Well, I thought it said that there were 6 and that we met all 6.
Yeah, so we
4 is the requirement.
want to have 6 strategies, and there's and I'll explain in just one
Did I
second.
miss your finish line?
You're good.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Okay.
Get behind the train.
I'll pull that.
You're fine. So with the fixed guideway transit station, we're also required to adopt one of these 3 in addition to the stationary plan strategy. And so one of the requirements by state code is we have to match the exact text in the strategies. So in our existing ordinance, we have these 3 strategies, or not ordinance, our existing moderate income housing element. We have these 3 strategies that actually meet the requirements for the new strategy. So we're not necessarily adopting new strategies, we're just matching states' requirements. Does that make sense? So, Bettina, to your point, so as a city, we want to adopt 6 strategies because that allows us to be what's called priority consideration. So if we only adopted 4 strategies, we would meet state requirement. But if we adopt 2 additional strategies, then we're considered a priority for TIF and TTIF transportation funds. So we definitely want to do 6 and not 4. This is just a map that shows the cities that have those fixed guideway transit stations. Yeah, and Salt Lake has a lot to work on. So as I stated, we are required to submit an annual report to Department of Workforce Services, their Housing and Community Development Division. The report is due by October 1st, 2022, and that's the reason we're coming to you now, so that we meet that requirement. Part of the report, we have to submit the ordinance that we've produced as part of this amendment, as well as the general plan amendment that includes the updated strategies, and the implementation plan. So this is what the report, well, portion of what the report looks like. I submitted that in your packets so you could see the entire report. So it lists the strategies that we're planning on incorporating into our addendum. And then this is just a glance at what the addendum looks like. So we'll submit both of these in addition to, or with the ordinance that is required as part of the reporting to the state. As far as the stationary plan, House Bill 462 did allocate funding so that cities can hire consultants to receive help in developing a stationary plan and adopting that plan. So there's funding we're looking into. We've attended several workshops about the stationary plans, and that's going to be administered through Wasatch Front Regional Council with their Transportation Land Use Connection grant. So,
And just really briefly, that as we've talked to Wasatch Front Regional Council staff, we're actually quite a ways further ahead than some cities on the stationary plan. We've already got a lot of the elements in place based on our mixed-use transit-oriented development zone that's there. What we have to do is look a little bit more broadly. There's some properties we don't include in that zone, so some of the property to the west and other areas. So we'll be coming back within the next couple of years, hopefully with some of this funding in tow, with some consultants to help us look at those other lands outside of that. But as we've talked with some of the, like I say, the Wasatch Front staff, they've said, yeah, you folks won't have to do quite as much as some of the other cities. We've already got a good head start. So
yeah, so I think it's a good spot. So any questions or anything I didn't address?
Right now, we have one station.
Correct.
And so, what's this half-mile buffer thing?
So that's the area that we have to plan the
where
stationary
you
plan.
need
So we look at all the
these
land
things.
uses around the station.
Right. And that's where we need to put whatever our plan is.
That's right.
We can't put them anywhere else.
Well, that's the only place that we would be required to do the
Oh,
stationary plan.
required, okay. Just one thing. I do a lot of things with wood, okay? And you're trying to get cheaper, that's not the right word, less expensive rent.
Mhm.
In order to do that, you can't build what's being built. You have to build something a little different. Does that mean, when you say density, does that mean smaller or more, or both?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you go up, it doesn't necessarily mean smaller, but it could be more units per acre.
You can put, yeah, okay, so that's one way
Mhm.
of adding, yeah, I mean, I understand that. But I keep thinking, it's hard to build what they're asking to build
Mhm.
without making it smaller.
Right.
You can't, I mean, if you
Or
take,
subsidized.
if you take, yeah, or subsidized. But if you take the smallest one that's being built right now, probably, I don't think would make it. I'm just guessing, but, it's, they say, what do they call it?
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, and it just, worries me. It's a term that doesn't make sense,
Yeah, and a lot of
without some things happening.
Yeah, a lot of the, state code addresses moderate income housing. So affordable housing is a little bit different than moderate income housing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, I know.
sometimes similar, but
That's because they involve lawyers.
yeah, true. But
You have no idea how true.
So we pick a plan,
uh,
okay, obviously, and we want 6 because we have the ability to get greater funding. And
well, and we actually have, I didn't say this, but we actually have 17 in our ordinance,
Oh,
not
really?
our ordinance, I keep saying that, in our element. So there are a lot of things that we're already doing,
okay.
but we're only required to do 6.
Yeah.
So,
some of those things that we're already doing, for example, one of the strategies is related to accessory dwelling units, to adopting accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We've done that.
Oh, right.
So that's an ongoing strategy. So we've included that in the strategies that we're doing. That's in addition to these 6.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think the state here is saying, all right, we're gonna help you out. We're putting infrastructure in these stations. Density makes the most sense near those stations.
Well, yeah, no, I
And so
understand.
we're all
that, yeah.
partnering together, so we
Yeah.
get on board sort of a thing, because that helps,
It makes sense.
helps
Yeah.
everybody.
There's no
I think
question.
that's the,
It's hard for me to get around the income thing because of the price of things,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, and so, you know, I'm looking at what you have to build to be able to make your money type thing, and all I see is something getting smaller. It may go higher, but it's gonna get smaller.
That's happening with food too.
Well, I mean, it's
You pay
happening
more
a lot
for
of
less.
things. But we're not asked to come up with 6 food items,
Right.
you know, thank goodness. Maybe we will, I don't know. But, you know, and so that's my concern. I can see it, and you guys, you're doing what you need to do and beyond. But I hate that word, affordable or moderate.
Well, it changes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it
it's
could be
just so
affordable.
hard.
5 years ago,
Word of
it
the
was
year.
no longer affordable.
Well, I mean, you know, it's just, with the price of everything, all I see is it just getting smaller,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and one of the things we had to report on before this year was the number of units that we have that fall under the 30%, 50%, 80% area median income.
Oh, I see.
And for us to provide housing that's 30% of the area median income is pretty much impossible without subsidized
Some
from the
kind,
state.
yeah.
Yeah.
And years ago, they used to do that with homes. I remember guys building 235s or something like that. But that's what they did.
Subsidized by the federal government.
The federal, yeah, they were subsidized for like 10 years or something. Yeah.
So I have 2 things.
Okay.
One, to piggyback on what Dave's talking about, in the area, you said the requirement is to be within 5 or half a mile of the standard station. We can do additionally to that, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah,
So
we could go further
bus
than that.
stops, et cetera,
Absolutely.
because there's not that much that we can do in that space right now, because we've done
Right, that's true.
already.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot
So
of
we have
land.
to move
Yeah, it's pretty
outside of
simple.
there. And then the other thing is not something that we can answer here right now, but it really does boil down to a need for some types of subsidy at some point. And it's not favorable for everybody, it's not what you want necessarily, but it takes lots of different entities coming together to figure out how can we address a problem. So it's not, oh, the federal government's gonna give money, the state's gonna give money, the city's gonna give money, but it takes interested parties all around to come together and figure out how can we get whatever grants we get and put that together and figure out how to help those who do need the help, because everybody who at one point needed subsidized housing, that whole population looks way different now than it did before, inclusive of a lot of people that you and I may be related to at this point. So we just have to broaden our thinking when it comes to things like that and not just assume it's gonna be A or B,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we've got
Totally agree.
26 voters. That's all.
All right, well, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, so then we can take
Do you have
those
more?
that are getting their,
What's that?
Do you have more?
No, that was it.
You're good.
we can have those that are getting their student loans removed, to make that a subtraction or whatever, so they can, we can charge more because they have, that's a subsidy.
That's their down payment.
Hey.
Okay,
I'm
well,
not
thank you.
denying.
I'm saddened by the
You know?
news.
I know, I'm sad too.
Well, you
What's
know,
your last day?
For sure. The 15th.
if you're going to better yourself, more power to you. If you're going because you can't stand working with Chad,
That's not true.
Okay, one more item.
Yeah, thank you. Just by way of brief explanation on this, this is an amendment to our private street ordinance. Tonight, though, we're actually going to ask you to open up the public hearing, take any public comment that we may have tonight. We have had this ordinance being reviewed by some of our developers, and they've asked for just a little bit of additional time to get any feedback to us. So we're going to actually ask you to continue this to your next meeting, September 15th, but we do want to open it up as an advertised. And we're happy to have those development partners looking at this ordinance, because we want to make sure that it's workable. But just really briefly, why we're coming with this private street ordinance. There's a few issues that we've seen repeatedly come back to us and that we need to address in an ordinance amendment. And first of those issues is related to gates. We have folks, once their subdivision has been constructed, they have a private street, they come back to the city and say, we really like to put a gate there. And unfortunately, and some of those have showed up at city council and asked about that. Unfortunately, because of the design of that development, it's not possible to do that. In order to have gates, there have to be certain standards met. One of the big ones is when you're on a busy street and you need to turn off, if you have a gate right at that street, it doesn't work. You have to have an area where a car can turn into and have a place to put in whatever code for their gate they need to put in, or a delivery truck to pull into. A lot of these subdivisions just have not been designed that way. And to go back retroactively to design those doesn't work, because you're putting gates in front of people's driveways or cutting homes that are in the subdivision outside of the gate, whatever the case may be. So that's one of the issues that we're going to address, and I'll talk about how we're trying to address that. Another issue that we look at is, in the past, we've approved some subdivisions that have used private streets as a way to increase their densities. They've said, I can do a smaller street, thereby have more units, and they've connected to public streets with this private street. Well, you can see what the issue is people say, I have people driving up my private street. Why am I letting people drive up my private street? Well, again, unfortunately, that's the way it was designed. It has that connection for utility purposes, for access purposes. That has to be kept that same design. So that's number, I guess, 2. Number 3 really comes down to maintenance of these streets and trying to make sure that we have clear definitions for when these private streets are allowed, for what types of private streets they are. Right now, we use a lot of different language in the code to describe private streets. We want to be consistent, and that's what this ordinance does. So this is a table that we're asking the council to adopt. A lot of the changes to the code are taking text and turning it into the table. We found that this is an easier way for us to interpret the code for developers. So we have a lot of text that we're going to take and make into a table. So you'll see a lot of strike-through text that's still here. It's just in a table. This is an attempt to distinguish between all these different things that we've always just kind of generically called private streets. Well, we want to make sure there's different types of private streets. We want to make sure we're being clear about which one we're talking about. So there's 4 different categories here. Private minor is one of the larger, even though we call it private minor, it's one of the larger of the private streets.
Private major, maybe?
We could, private general, private major, yeah. That was not lost on us, so that's why we have the name we do. But anyway,
As long as it's not.
whatever it's called.
Right.
So this would be for cul-de-sacs or streets with 10 or fewer lots or units on. This is the largest of those that's allowed. Private lane would be for 5 dwelling units. You've seen quite a few of those subdivisions come through that have these private lanes that access up to 5 units. Private drive is really, that's be like a flag lot, right? That's going to be when you have a flag lot situation where two dwelling units are sharing the same driveway. And then private alley, this really comes down to our townhome developments where we have rear-loaded units that are being, and sometimes single family that are rear-loaded, that are being accessed by an alley. There's lots of footnotes that go along with each of those to describe some of the other elements there, and we can go into that as you'd like. Back to gates. We want to be clear about when gates are allowed and when they're not. First of all, they're only allowed on these private lanes or private drives. They're only allowed when we're not connecting, 2 streets together. That's been an issue for us, that we have to still provide that access way. There has to be a vehicle turnaround designed at the time these developments are put together. So there has to be adequate turnaround for delivery trucks, people that are stopping to enter the gate, put in their code, whatever the case may be, and then have compliance with fire code. There's things that they can do to make sure that we can get access in there if we need to. Knox boxes, there's strobing detectors where the strobe of the fire truck can open those gates up. So there's a variety of ways to address that, but that's, and a Knox box, for those of you not familiar, that's a little box they have a master key to, and it's got a key to the gate, right, that lets them in. So that's,
Do the other things apply to the street if it's a lane or private, like a speed bump? Because you don't put speed bumps in because of fire, right? I mean, so are they, is that? They
yeah,
have
the
to,
private streets have a little bit of leeway on that if they're designed that way.
but they have to be able to accept the fire?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it depends on the type of
Yeah.
street and the size and things, but, a couple other things just related to the private minor streets, that's again, the biggest one, these have to be at least 3 acres.
So no
Yeah.
gate for lease.
No gates, well, yes, that's right, those gates are allowed on those first 2, yeah, so the private lane, private drive. So these larger ones, we don't allow the gates. There has to be, let's get back to this one, has to be built to a public street standard, right? So that's to address some of those issues where these streets are just substandard in the way they're built. These are for the larger of those, hopefully to address some of the issues people have when these are not built to a good standard and tend to deteriorate quickly. Limited use can't be used to connect 2 or more public roads like we talked about, and has to be limited to dead-end streets or cul-de-sacs.
Before you go forward.
Yeah.
And on number 1, the previous slide from
Yeah.
you, you said that, I think it was item C3, that this had to be done during the design. It doesn't say design, but it's engineering development. Is that intention of those terms to be, you have to have planned this during the design phase? Because you mentioned design, but it doesn't specifically say that in here.
I think, yeah, you're right, and I think that we have left it a little bit open because there could be a situation where someone happened to design it to a way that it couldn't work. We didn't want to shut the door on that, but our experience is that most of the time it can't meet that 3 criteria if they happen to design that way. So I appreciate that clarification. Yeah, we did leave that open a little bit. I don't know of any right now that have requested gates that they can actually make that work because they just haven't been designed that way. So without removing a home or something like that, really, so.
One up on the east side. I think there might be one.
That could meet the criteria. One east of 89?
Mm-hmm.
That one probably could, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the number of units, I'll have to look at that one. But,
They've been in.
yeah.
And what do you do for these private streets that are not meeting what you're proposing?
Existing private streets can continue to function in the way they were designed. That's why we're trying to address those, that we do have some issues with some that do connect to public streets. And so we're trying to make sure that anything new that's built don't have those same issues. So, not a lot more to say other than we're gonna also change, and this is something you'll see next week at our next meeting as part of the engineering standards, where we found that we can reduce our public utility and drainage easement a little bit. So we're gonna be proposing that as part of this change. It's also included in those engineering standards, just to provide some additional buildable area. And anyway, that's related, but kind of a separate issue. I think, sorry for the I think the only other thing that relates to private streets is that we right now don't have a standard that requires a separation of buildings on these rear loaded lots. Why that's important is that when we have a street, we have this standard that says you have to have 26 feet of pavement, but there's no minimum distance between the buildings. So you could essentially have a 2 buildings 26 feet from each other. What we're finding is that when people take advantage of that, they're not giving themselves enough room for foundations, footings, and things, and they have a tendency to want to undermine those roads as they're building. So we're going to say that you can have a 26-foot wide pavement, but you still got to give yourself a little bit of room so that you don't undermine the pavement or have problems with conflict with the buildings. We've had that issue, we're trying to solve it with this ordinance. That'll give a little bit of extra room on each side to have some space between the footings of the building and the street. Those are the highlights. We included a copy of the ordinance in your packet. We'll talk about it more at our next meeting as well. Tonight I'll just do a brief explanation. If we could open up the public hearing, we'll look for some of those comments from our development partners next meeting, if they have any. They wanted to look at first and see if they have any comments. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chad, I apologize if you covered this, but sometimes my mind's just trying to catch up to what you say. I remember a private road, and maybe it got changed to a public road on a development a year or two ago, up north of 93.
193?
Yeah.
North of-
So it went from 193 to another subdivision. Do we have an ordinance? Can you have a private road that connects to two
No.
public roads?
And that one, that's actually a really good example of a situation where we pulled the brakes on that one and said, we can't have this situation. So that was converted to a public road, yeah. Originally approved as a private, they came back for a change in development agreement amendment, and we said, as part of your development agreement amendment, you've got to change it, so.
Big deal.
So is it in our code then, or does this change it so that, does it say you can't connect
That's right.
two public?
Can't connect two public roads with a private street.
Okay, good, thanks.
And existing ones that are out there?
Got a few, yeah.
Yeah.
They just have to, they'll be allowed to continue, but they still can't shut those down because those do provide connections and access to the residents of the development that needs to be maintained. And there's sometimes, most cases, there's utilities in those private streets that need to have access by the public as well.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's pretty much it on our work meeting then, other than we've got a birthday celebration here.
Sure do.
This isn't just any birthday though. This is a numbered, this has got
It's
a
a number.
zero behind it.
Yeah, unlike the one behind it was,
Yeah. and then it's a-
That was not a number.
Yeah, it's got a big zero.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I mean, it's another day. You know, it's fun. You know, I've never been 70 before.
Pretty profound.
Yeah, well, you know, profound is my middle name. Yeah.
So, Dave, you get the first cupcake here.
I can't eat
I'll bring it to
sugar.
you.
I can't eat sugar.
Yeah, well, we know you do.
I sneak
Even
it.
though you
My
can't.
wife, she'll smell it and have my
Yeah.
Ed.
Look at you.
Okay, she's watching, we'll throw her on.
Very good. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our Layton City Council meeting this evening. It is September 1st, so we are starting at 7 p.m. I know that we have a good crowd out here tonight, and I'm excited for some of the verbal petitions we have, and want to acknowledge everyone here. Councilmember Thomas thought you were all here for his birthday celebration coming up, since he's going to be turning 70 in 2 days, but that's okay.
I appreciate everybody. So it's over. Let's go.
Nice try. So as I call the meeting to order, for the folks that are here, just so you know, we like to take turns each month to to start our meeting off, and we always like to start our meeting off with a prayer and a pledge. And this month is Councilmember Tyson Roberts' turn, so I am going to turn the time over to him. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With the mayor's permission, I'm going to ask someone to come up and sit on my lap to give the prayer today. Maybe never happened before here, but Navina Roberts, my daughter, if you'll come up.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you that we all can be here today. Thank you for all of our blessings. Thank you for the police and first responders. Please bless us to have a good evening. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. How cute.
Now, if you will all stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
How cute is that? I love it. That's, like I said, that was a first, so I think it was wonderful. Okay, council, we have a set of minutes here this evening that we need to approve. And so I hope you've all read your minutes, and if you have any changes, please note it. Otherwise, I'll look for some action to accept them as written.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of Layton City Council work meeting August 18th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt the minutes from the August 18th, 2022 Layton City Council work meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. I appreciate that. We'll now move on to our municipal announcements. And I know a few of you sit on several different boards and probably have some announcements to make. So who would like to go first?
Keeping up with tradition, Parks and Recreation usually first, but a couple weeks away we have a family recreation activity on September 16th, 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., Park After Dark. So there will be a lot of games here at Layton Commons Park. Games, there'll be a live DJ. We'll have s'more stations for people. You can come and cook s'mores and just spend the evening with your family, with friends here in the park.
Okay, it's a fun event. With all the youth out here, you need to come. Okay. Councilman.
I do have one announcement from the Layton Communities That Care. We have a program called Strengthening Families. You may or may not have heard of it, but it's a program that just helps to promote healthy families and communication between adults and their children. And it's going to be held on Mondays, October 3rd through November 21st from 6 to 8:30 p.m. at Layton Elementary on Gentile, and they will offer free dinner and childcare. So if you're interested in participating in that, you can go to the Davis Behavioral Health website and you can sign up for free. That starts in October.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and make an announcement on behalf of the Davis 9/11 Remembered. That's an event that's going to take place down at the Legacy Center, which is in Farmington. And it will start after Labor Day. It will begin on Wednesday and go through Saturday. And this is a huge event that's really going to kind of help educate folks on maybe the feel and what the first responders had to go through, as a lot of residents as well, through that tragic event that took place on 9/11. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to kind of really understand the service that's available and a chance for you to say thank you to a lot of these folks. The hours are going to be 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Wednesday through Saturday. I do know that there's a lot of schools that are signed up are going to come earlier in the day from 9 to 2, but certainly this is a county-wide event that we'd like to see everyone get out and come see at your convenience. And in addition to that, we've got a great group of folks here in Layton City that has organized. They actually organized last year a 9/11 Day of Service, and they're going to continue it this year. It will be on Saturday, which is actually the 10th, and there's a lot of different opportunities for you to go out and just give, even if you can just give an hour. Please go on the Just Serve website, and you'll see where those events are, as well as, do we have it posted on our website, Mr. Price, at all? Okay, so yes, if you'd like to go to justserve.org, and you'll be able to see all the different projects. I think there's somewhere between 30 and 40 different projects, and they're designed to be close to your home and easy for you to go and help. And it's just a good way to kind of recognize how valuable our lives are and the importance of caring for one another. So with that, I will go ahead and ask if any other council member has any other announcements. Okay, seeing that there's none, now we get to go to the fun part of the meeting, which is some verbal petitions and presentations. And I know that we've got some youth here tonight that really do a fantastic job. And I don't want to steal the thunder of their leader, because their leader is so valuable to us. So Miss Carlene Kidman, if you could come up to the mic and kind of explain what this program is. And then perhaps at the end, I do know that, just so you're aware, we have each, like I mentioned, each council member has an opportunity to serve on different boards. And I know, Bettina, believe you're over this youth court. So if you'd like to make a statement at the end, you're welcome to. But let's have Carlene make her presentations.
Thank you. For those parents who haven't actually met me, I'm Carlene. I'm the one that emails you all the time. So, Mayor and Council and everyone else, this is our 25th year group of youth. We have been doing this for this is our 25th year, which I was just talking to Dave going, where's the time gone? 25 years. I was a lot younger, but they keep me young, and so it's great. Your youth are phenomenal. Do you guys know what youth court is, or do you need me to explain it to anybody? Who does not know what youth court is? See, great group. I don't have to explain it. So these youth have been in training. We started training in April. And so as you've come, you've probably seen us in here on a Wednesday from 3:30 to 5 training. And then we've stayed for cases, and we do cases until we're done with our cases.
Carlene, just briefly, just in case somebody online might wonder what it is, just briefly kind of explain what it is.
What youth court is a diversion program, and it's for youth who get arrested or get in trouble at school for for minimal charges, for B and C misdemeanors. And they have a chance to admit to their charges and come to youth court and go in front of a panel of their peers who hears the case and comes up with a disposition based on restorative justice principles. And as long as they complete the program, it doesn't go on their record, and it's like it never happened. It's like a second chance. So If you have any questions, let me know. But it's a great program, like we've been doing it here for 25 years. And these are the youth that are trained. These are the judges, the clerks, the bailiffs. They do everything about it. I'm the director. I'm just behind the scenes. I train them. And then I'm there to help them when they have questions. But they ask all the questions. They do all the dispositions. They are the mentors, the contacts, and they do everything. So it's not me, it's them, and they're phenomenal. So what we're going to do first is I have the first of the certificates are the youth. We had 10 youth in the class this year that started. And so we'll do those certificates first. And then we have, just 12 youth that who come back for this next year to continue. As you see, not all of the youth are here because it's a Thursday and everyone knows Wednesday's youth court. So having these youth here, it's phenomenal to have this many because they are busy, busy, busy youth. So it's great to have them. So when you guys come up, I'll give you a certificate, go around, talk to everyone, and then line up here, and then we'll swear you guys all in, okay? Okay, so I'll say your name. Okay. Bridger Porter. Okay, come up around here, go up right around here. Drayden Tolton. There's Drayden. And Drayden's also in our presidency this year to help with computers. Let me take my little note off there. Kai Olenslager. Did I get that right? Did I say it right? He is going to be in our presidency with help with the choices class. Okay. Katie's not here. Lucy Clark. She's going to be in the presidency as our chief secretary. Stella Wang is going to be in the presidency as our activities coordinator. Timothy Schaefer-Meyer. I got it right. Okay. And he is in the presidency doing the computers. Okay. So those are our new that are just doing training. So now we're going to go with the ones who have been here for a while. Alex Connors. He just finished his first year, and he has been our vice president, continues our vice president.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Ashley's not here. Did Dane come? Okay. Eliza. Okay, let me put these in the back. Eliza has been here a year, and here's yours. Ellen Olenslager. She just completed her second year with us. So, and these certificates, I know the mayor got to see them, but they tell everything they've done for over the year and how many hours they put in. Is Jade here? I didn't know if I saw Jade. Okay. Madeline. Okay. Rachel, she was going to come. Isaac. Okay, now these ones, Isaac's going to stand here for a minute. Okay, we have 5 youth who actually volunteered. Ellen, get up here too. Don't just leave. Okay. You guys can back up a little, you know. Okay. We have 5 youth who, if they volunteer over 100 hours in 12 months, they qualify for what's called a Presidential Student Service Award, where they get a letter and a certificate from the President of the United States. And so we have 5 youth who have earned that, and it's phenomenal to do that. You think about these youth, they're so busy, and to volunteer 100 hours, that's pretty good. And so I want to commend them for that. This year, unfortunately, they didn't have a pin, so we got medallions. So you have a medallion instead of a pin, so hopefully that will be okay. But the national site does not have any more pins, so I don't know why, but we have the certificates for you. So Isaac Moore has just finished his first year, and he actually has a Presidential Student Service Award. It's in this white envelope, so congratulations. Caitlin Green has been one of our vice presidents and will continue this next year. She just finished her first year, and she also received a Presidential Student Service Award. Majestic Christensen just finished her second year, and she's been our historian, will continue to be our historian because she's a great historian. And she just completed her second year, and she received a Presidential Student Service Award. Caitlin Mitchell has been in the presidency. She's in charge of our choices class, and she's completed her 3rd year. So she's been around for a while, and she received a Presidential Student Service Award. There you go. And last but not least, Ariana Martinez just completed her 2nd year. She is our president, and she is going to continue. I've asked her to continue to be our president next year, and she earned a Presidential Student Service Award. Very good. And that's all of them for right now, so.
So we can clap now?
Yeah.
Are you good with them?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You ready for me? Yeah, you can swear me in.
Okay, congratulations on your certificates. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations.
And Mayor, I hate to ask this, but when we're done, can we be excused? So we can go downstairs and take some more
I
pictures.
hope you've got some treats for these kids.
We do have a couple treats.
There's some in the back.
Let's give Councilmember Bettina Smith Edmondson an opportunity to kind of just say a quick thank you, because I mean this is admirable. I love it. This is our future, so I'm all about this.
I'll be brief, but we just thank all of the hard work that Carlene has done over these 25 years. This is not the only committee that she's on. She does a lot in the community, but her heart is absolutely in with the kids, the children, the youth, the young people of our city, and pretty much everywhere. So we thank you for all the time that you spend, with these kids. They love coming because if they didn't, they wouldn't be here. So you guys are in great hands. Those of you who just finished training, you've been with Carlene since April, but you're in great hands, and we're just excited with whatever you plan to do in the future and hope that you'll continue to use your talents and your gifts here in Layton. So congratulations, and we'll look forward to seeing all that you are going to do for the future of this year. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So you're well. You can be excused. Oh yeah, good idea. I know. That's what it looks like. We're just exercising cautious. Okay. You can see what a great group of kids we have, and what an honor it is to be able to have them come up and know the amount of hours of service. Boy, if that isn't a challenge for the rest of us, I don't know what is. But anyway, I'll continue on with this council meeting this evening. We are down to item number 4, which is our citizens' comment portion of the meeting. And under citizens' comment, really what this is about is for you to bring any of your concerns or whatever you want to say before the council here that is not an item on our agenda. So if there's an item on the agenda, or I should say part of the public hearing, then we ask that if you're here for the public hearing, wait until we open that meeting and then we'll have you go ahead and speak. But anything else, you're welcome to come up and take a brief moment if you can to address us. So with that, I'll turn the time over to you. Okay, great. Seeing that there's no citizens' comment, I'll go ahead and move on down to our consent items. We do have 2 consent items this evening. The first one will be presented by our Parks Director, Mr. Dave Price, which is a proposal for an agreement between Layton City and EPG Design. So, Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As the mayor said, this evening I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 2253. If accepted, this resolution will approve a proposal for an agreement between Layton City and EPG Design for professional engineering, landscape architectural services for Commons Park, Case Creek Trail, and stream bank improvements. Layton City proposes to make improvements to the Commons Park, Case Creek Trail, and stream bank. These improvements are needed because of the long-term erosion of the stream bank. As you can see in the pictures, this has been going on for many years, and in several locations the sidewalk is actually being undercut. So it's important we take care of this. And this is one of our most popular walks in the city. So it's important for the city. This proposal also includes pedestrian walkway lighting along the corridor, similar to the existing lighting located in the rest of the park. A request for proposals for engineering and landscape architectural design services that included preliminary design, design development, construction documentation, and construction supervision services was distributed to all interested firms. 8 professional engineering and landscape architectural firms responded to this RFP by turning in a proposal and a sealed fee on September 23rd, 2021. All of these firms were given the opportunity to be interviewed and present their proposals. The proposals and interviews were evaluated and scored by 5 individuals using predetermined weighted scoring criteria. EPG Design received a score of 66 out of 70 possible points in the technical proposal evaluation. Once the technical proposal evaluation was complete, the fee proposals were opened. Fees were valued at 30% of the overall score. Each firm's fee was given a numeric score based on their relative placement within the range of fees provided by each firm. EPG's design fee of $91,304.80 received a numeric score of 22.6 out of 30 possible points. The combination of technical proposal score of 66 and a fee proposal score of 22.6 gave EPG Design the highest overall score of 88.6 points out of 100. The project received additional funding in this year's budget. The overall top 3 scoring proposals were revisited on August 10th, 2022. Each of the 3 firms were asked to revisit their fee proposals. Each firm's fee was again given a numeric score based on their relative placement within the range of fees provided by each firm. The proposed fees for this project ranged from a low of $68,660 to a high of $103,142.76. EPG Design's fee of their revised design fee of $91,304.80 received a numerical score of 22.6 out of 30 possible points. The combination of technical proposal scores of 66 and a fee proposal score of 22.6 gave EPG Design the highest overall score of 88.6 points out of 100 possible. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2253, authorizing the city manager to conduct negotiations and execute an agreement between Layton City and EPG Design for professional engineering and landscape architectural services.
Okay.
Any questions?
Council, you have any questions regarding this?
Thank you.
I have one, sorry, Dave. So I just was looking at the evaluations, between EPG and BioWest. 2 of the evaluators thought they were the same. 2 of the evaluators actually preferred BioWest, and then there's a big discrepancy between what one of the evaluators decided on EPG is double the score of BioWest, which was the tie-breaking vote. So maybe can you speak to maybe what that evaluation would have looked like? Because two of the evaluators actually preferred the other one. So, and there's only one that preferred EPG, and that won the day just because their score was so drastically different than the other. So just some more information on that.
Yeah, the panel was made up of 3 Parks employees, Ryan Pickup, myself, and Joel and Grandy. And then we had 2 individuals from the engineering department. And that was Alan McKen and Steve Fuhrer. And each individual takes a different look based on their experience and provides those scores. We do not counsel together during that process, and so we allow them, each individual evaluator, to have the independence that they feel like they need. And so I can't speak to why, exactly one individual scored it that much higher or lower.
Anyone else?
Councilman Bloxham, would you be interested in having more information about those 2 together, like maybe relook?
I guess it's more of just the concept of the evaluation. I mean, I would think that the fact that these two of the 5 evaluators preferred BioWest. 2 of them thought they were the same. One of them preferred EPG, but the only reason why EPG scored a higher score was because they scored BioWest as half, or almost less than half of what EPG was. So it seems to me a strange kind of evaluation scale where you can actually have 2 of the 5 evaluators prefer one contractor, and then one prefers the one that wins it, but they win it because they have such a low score. So I know they come from different evaluations, so it was just an interesting dynamic that was one evaluator's score of this individual company was so less that's what was the differentiator. So it's not necessarily, I'm not trying to get involved in nitty gritty, it was just interesting.
Well, and doesn't the fee factor really kind of weigh heavily? I mean, you guys wait. I mean, nobody sees those until the end, right? So that's kind of acts as more or less a tiebreaker as well.
We don't see the fees until this process is completely finished, and then we add that score. Yeah. I know that both times we evaluated these, we had a similar ranking, and fee was the thing that made the difference. And all 3 of these are wonderful firms. BioWest, their specialty is more on the natural side of things, and EPG has a little more experience in the built environment. And one of those evaluators, and I apologize, I don't remember which individual it was, but they may have been thinking more about the built environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, the only reason I asked that question is because if you do look at BioWest, everyone else scored them as 70. So it was, it does just bring a question about the technical piece, because I know you had a reevaluation on the fee portion, but not necessarily the technical portion, as you wouldn't have expected that to change. But yeah, I don't know that we need to do anything about that, but just calling attention to it because it does look like that one person brought the rest of the averages down.
Well, and quite honestly, you guys, I know how often we speak about how valuable our employees are, and I think this is a situation where, we need to support our director here. I mean, if he felt comfortable in this selection as well, then I think it's on our best interest to kind of support him. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and move on unless anybody else has any other questions or concerns. Okay, thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number B, which is Mr. Chad Wilkinson will be presenting a amended subdivision plat to us.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, this is a subdivision amendment application. Just by way of background, this is for the Eastgate Business Park subdivision. This is the second plat amendment that they've brought forward. The property is shown, the approximate location of the property is shown there with the red dot on the map. It's at 3675 North Fairfield Road. This is a property that's about 55 acres, a little over 55 acres in size, owned by, go the right way here, owned by JL Partners. This property is zoned for industrial use, and there was a previous application that amended this subdivision to add a little additional square footage to the existing Janicki building that's just shown there just outside of that red boundary. This particular subdivision application would create an additional lot. Now, I want to show just really briefly the previous application. This is that amendment that added that little bit of square footage to, it was quite a bit of square footage, but some area to Janicki's existing lot. This is the remainder parcel. It's big enough that it covers 2 pages of a map, so that's the south portion of that. This new application, this is actually the south piece, but this is the new lot that's being created, 106. That will be, there's actually a building being constructed there now. It was permitted prior to the subdivision application because there was an existing lot there. They've decided they want to partition that lot off now and create a new parcel there for that existing building that you can see under construction. Again, going back to that previous map, that's the south piece of that 106. It's, again, long enough that it needs to have its own page. So with that, this was reviewed by the Planning Commission. They did recommend that the City Council approve this application. One other note, just you'll remember a couple weeks ago or a couple meetings ago, the City Council approved quitclaim deeds, approval of some quitclaim deeds, and deemed a couple of small parcels as insignificant parcels. Those parcels are now included in this plat and will be platted as one large parcel as this goes forward. So with that, we are recommending the council approve this subdivision amendment.
Okay. Any questions, council?
Okay, thank you.
Very simple. Okay. That concludes our consent items. So I'll bring it back to the council here if you would like to take action regarding the 2 items. Again, just for public information, we are able to consider these items as to be routine and can act upon them in one single motion. So with that, council, I'd look for a motion to include both items, please.
Mayor, I'd make a motion that the City Council approve the consent items A, Resolution 22-53, and consent item B, amended subdivision plat, Eastgate Business Park, Second Amendment.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that we adopt the consent items as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. We have 3 items on our public hearing. We'll start out, and actually, ironically, all 3 of them, Mr. Wilkinson gets to present all of them, so he'll be standing up there, I think, for the duration of this meeting. But we'll go ahead and start with the first item, A, which is an annexation agreement and a rezone request for the Jenkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, this is, there's 3 parts to this application. We've got an annexation, a rezone request, and as part of that rezone request, we have an annexation agreement. So you'll have a resolution and 2 different ordinances that would be proposed for your consideration and potentially adoption tonight. Give a little bit of a background on this particular application. It is an annexation and rezone request from to annex some property and to change the zone from A, which is our agricultural zone, to R110 PRUD. PRUD is a planned residential urban development, which is a way for there to be some flexibility in the administration of our zoning ordinance. The property itself is shown there again in the red. You can see again a good portion of the property is outside of city limits. That's approximately 3071 West Gentile. There is a piece of the property that's already within the city limits. You can see that outlined in red. That yellow is the portion that's being considered for annexation. So total property area for this potential development is 18 and a little over half acres, and then just under 15 and a half acres for the annexation area. You can see some of the surrounding uses in this aerial photo. Residential use, existing residential use along 3200 west, to the west of the property. To the south, we have the perennial favorites, existing business, agricultural business there. A lot of vacant ground to the east. Currently, most of that predominantly is outside of city limits, again, within an unincorporated portion of Davis County. If we had a little bit more updated photo, you'd see the new 2700 West extension in about that area. That's been constructed, waiting opening for some of the additional construction that's occurring on the West Davis corridor, which is located here along the south portion of this, or the bottom portion of this picture. So just some context of what some of those surrounding uses are. Of course, to the north, existing single-family residential. This again just outlines that requested zone, rezone R110 PRUD from ag. I want to just briefly touch on the design of this proposed PRUD development. This is the subdivision layout. This is a total of 91 units, which consist of 67 single-family homes, and then 24, let me check my numbers, I believe that's right, 24 townhome units. The townhome units, now in this particular picture, east is up, so the top of the picture here is east, north would be over to the left-hand side, south to the right, west to the bottom. So on the east side of the development, there are these townhome units that are proposed as part of this planned residential unit development. You can see some open space that runs throughout the development. Just as a background on these PRUDs, about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago exactly, we had a revision to our PRUD ordinance as part of our general plan update, and that amendment to the PRUD ordinance was really focused around making sure that these developments provide for meaningful open space. There is flexibility given to the applicants on the lot sizes, on the configuration of the property, and in return for that, the expectation is that they would provide for open space and other amenities for residents of this development. So in working with the applicant, our planning staff have put together this plan that contains open space that meets the requirements of our code. Open space that's located within a certain distance of each of the units, that's large enough to be meaningful, that can be used. They've also got some meaningful amenities that I'll go over in just one moment, and that's part of the design of this particular development. Speaking of those amenities, one note that I want to make related to the development agreement that's before you, that development agreement contemplated a sand volleyball court in this location. As this development moved through the Planning Commission process, the applicant requested and was reviewed by the Planning Commission a small change in response to a desire of the current property owner to reflect kind of the agricultural history of this property and to show some upgraded playground amenities that would include kind of a farm theme. You can see that shown on the screen, a playground that looks a little bit like a barn type area. This is typical of the type of playground equipment you'd see. Again, some interactive type, tractor type playground equipment as well, to again give a nod to that agricultural heritage of this property. The other thing would be community garden was substituted for a portion of the open space. I'll go back to that plan. Right in this location, there'd be a community garden that would be proposed by the applicant. So those are two items that were proposed in lieu of that sand volleyball court. In addition, the applicants proposed a pickleball court here, a dog park, and some other additional open space and trail system that would go through the development. Just want to walk briefly through typical elevations. These are the types of homes that would be built there in this particular subdivision. These are some single-family homes. Because this is a smaller lot subdivision, these will be somewhat smaller homes, but you can see they're good quality elevations that have been proposed by the applicant, a variety of those. These are the typical elevations for the townhomes that'll be constructed on that east side of the property, both front and some side elevations there rendering, so you can see what those look like. Now I want to just take just a moment to talk about the Planning Commission process. This did go to the Planning Commission for review. There was an issue that came up at Planning Commission that I want to talk just briefly about and then give the public a chance to chime in during the public hearing. But one of the issues that came up during the Planning Commission review, and often does come up on developments of this nature, is compatibility with the surrounding land use, and particularly the issue that came up was along this south property boundary. As I mentioned before, this development borders on this existing agricultural business, Perennial Favorites. It's a long-standing business here in the Layton area, and there was some concern that was raised about impacts or mitigating impacts from this new development that could potentially occur to that existing business. And those are legitimate concerns. We definitely understand those concerns. We completely agree that there are some impacts that will occur to that property as a result of this development. Our current code, whenever we have a new subdivision, residential subdivision that's proposed adjacent to an existing agricultural use, we have some standards that apply, things that have to occur in order for that development to go forward. One is that on the plat, there has to be a note with specific language that references that existing agricultural use. I'll go to that language in just a moment. In addition, both code and development agreement require construction of some buffer fencing, in this case a solid vinyl fence along that south property line to provide some additional buffer. One of the things that was brought up as a potential additional mitigation measure by the adjacent property owner was the potential for a pathway and buffer along that south property line as part of the open space. Now, we mentioned to the Planning Commission that if that was to be considered as part of the minimum open space for the development, it would have to be at least 18 feet wide with a pathway located inside of it. That 18-foot requirement goes back to what we talked about before when the City Council adopted these new PRED regulations. They wanted to make sure that open space was large enough that it could actually be utilized and be meaningful. So the Planning Commission considered that potential mitigation measure, actually postponed their decision on the subdivision for several weeks to give an opportunity for the applicant to look at what the impacts of that would be to the design and what the potential layout of that type of a buffer would be. We received those revised plans, those potential plans for a trail to be located along that south portion of the property. We reviewed that, and we reviewed it very carefully. This was not something that was taken lightly by staff. We understood the impacts. We knew that these were legitimate concerns. As we reviewed that plan, we did have some concerns of our own on building a trail in that location. One, first, as we talked about before, our direction from council and through the ordinance has been that we create open spaces that are meaningful, that have connection to each other, that provide meaningful, in the case of trails, meaningful connections to other parts of the development or other adjacent properties. As we looked at that location for a trail, we just did not see that there was any really meaningful connections for that trail to anything. We had a sidewalk that already provided that east-west connection in that general location. Felt that would be, in some ways, again, providing a connection that already occurred in other ways in that development. We also had concerns about what the effect of that would be on the design of the subdivision and on actually just the open space itself. Having that trail going through that portion of the property, there would be a required buffer fence along the very south property line, and we would anticipate that there would be an interior fence as part of those interior properties. And that would create somewhat of an effect of having, a fence trail with really no interaction with anything surrounding it. And that was a concern to us. We've also had concerns from other developments that have previously been approved with those types of fences running along rear property lines with fences on, those kind of trails running along rear property lines with fences on both sides, that sometimes those become areas that are a concern for maintenance, that are concerned for activity that goes on there, that sometimes will collect trash and other debris that just tend to not be really used or meaningful open space for the development and end up causing their own set of concerns. So as we weighed that with the potential for buffering, we did feel and made our thoughts known to the developer that we would actually still recommend that we did not include that as part of the buffer requirements for the subdivision. Now, that was not, there was a change made, though. I want to make sure that we know that we did make a change to that layout as part of the conversation about buffering on this. The lots were deepened, so the lot depths on each of these lots along the south property line were increased in order to provide additional setback. What that enabled the development team to do is to have lots that were deep enough to provide the minimum setback for an agricultural zone property. So if a home was to be built in an agricultural zone that was adjacent to this property, then that minimum setback would be 30 feet, and that's what they were able to provide along the back of those properties. I want to just talk about the language that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. This is, in our code, we have a provision that says if there's any new subdivision that's located within 300 feet of an existing agricultural operation, there has to be notice given on the plat. This is that language. It's recorded on all plats that we approve close to agricultural use. It talks about that those that are moving in there are given notice that they're moving next to an existing agricultural use that has activities that are associated with it that could potentially create inconvenience or annoyances to the neighboring property owners, and that those agricultural uses are allowed to continue to exist, and that those are legal, and that they have been given, as you see, highest priority use status in that language. As the Planning Commission considered that, they also asked that there be an additional step with that particular language. If we go back to the plan, what the applicant has agreed to is not only the language that would be recorded on the face of the plat, but also some additional deed declaration to be recorded on the actual deeds for each of those. I think we counted to 11 on in the work session, but there's 11 lots along the south property line that would have even more language recorded on the lot to give notice to those property owners. And the Planning Commission recommended that there be additional language added to our standard language to address issues such as lighting, noise, some of the other impacts that would occur based on the nature of the adjacent use. Hours of operation, dust, those types of things would also be included in that notice. As we took all of these things as a whole, again, the additional lot depth that was provided, the additional notice that would be required, the fencing that was already required, we did feel that that was adequate mitigation. We do, again, have the same standards that apply to any time that a subdivision is built next to an agricultural piece of land, which we have many examples of that within the city. And we did feel that that mitigation was adequate to, again, provide notification to future property owners and to provide the mitigation that's already contemplated in our code. So that was a lot of discussion. The Planning Commission did review this request, recommended unanimously that the City Council approve the ordinances related to rezoning, annexation, and the resolution that is approving the annexation agreement for this particular property. So with that, staff joins in that recommendation. We would recommend that the City Council adopt Ordinance 22-16, annexing approximately 15.39 acres. We would recommend that you adopt Resolution 22-45, which is the annexation agreement between Layton City and Donnie Jenkins property, and the Ordinance 22-17, which approves that rezone request from A to R110 PRUD. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay, Council, do you have any questions before we open it up for a public hearing?
Thank you.
Okay, seeing that there's no questions at this point in time, I'll look for action to open our public hearing, and we'll be ready to take public comment. But I do need somebody to open it up.
Make a motion that we open for public hearing.
Okay, in a second.
Second.
Item A.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We now are in our public hearing portion of this meeting. In the particular, the item number A, which is the annexation agreement. So anybody who'd wish to speak on this topic, you're welcome to come up to either side, state your name and address for the record. If you're here representing a larger group, I'd be happy to give you more time. If it's just individually, that's fine. We'll still give you some time. One thing to keep in mind, though, that if a statement has already been made or alluded to the same type of information, then hopefully the next person come up, you need to bring up new information is what I'm trying to drive at. So with that, the time is now yours.
Tommy Joe Tudor, 1757 Gregory Drive, Layton, Utah, 84041. Been here 54 years now. Worked under about 6 different mayors of the city. And now my thing today is happiness. Because my wife and I went and saw the music concert in Layton out there with the brothers there, and it was fantastic. The Oak Brothers, okay? There was 4 men, and it was great. And I'm keeping it short.
No, it isn't that. It's just that right now we're in the public hearing. We've already had our citizens comment, and that would have been fallen under citizens, but now we're under a specific item, which is an annexation agreement. So you need to speak to that topic.
That's an annexation of the city to take care of the people that buy the city's tickets.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I touched it together.
You did. Awesome. Thank you, hometown hero. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sarah Frame. I'm at 199 South 3200 West. I border the proposed development directly to the west. And I'm speaking in opposition to this. I've spoken with many of our neighbors who are pretty disappointed that this development is going in, including people that have lived in the area for decades and decades. We moved to this area from Riverton because there was space to breathe, and it felt agricultural and rural, and we love the feel of the area. The pace of development on West Gentile has been appalling, and honestly, I'm sure you guys hear this constantly, the construction traffic is awful. With the West Davis Highway, they're trucking, it feels like there's trucks every 30 seconds. There's tons of development in Syracuse, so we get a lot of that traffic off of Gentile. You know, this puts a strain on already strained water resources. It's habitat for animals that, you know, migrate, birds that migrate. It's just a beautiful, quiet area. And it's sad to see all of this farmland go away. It's not my property. It's not mine to say what happens to it, but I just want to say I hope you guys are thinking about in the macro, not just this property, but I mean, all of the properties in West Layton feel like they're being gobbled up for developments that are really dense. Just adds a lot more traffic, and it just makes it feel not like the area that we moved to, which is really sad. So that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak?
My name's Preston Cox. I live at 257 South, 3200 West, Layton, Utah, the owner of Perennial Favorites Nursery there. And just a little bit of a history. And the main reason I'm standing here today is just to get some things in the minutes and on the record, express some of my concerns here. And at no time during this process have I said that I am opposed to this development. I want that to be very clear, especially to the Jenkins family and to Nielsen Homes. Have I ever said that? No, I have not. Okay? But I do have some concerns, and you know, going through the discussion with staff and planning commissioners a little bit, it's always talking about the impact on this development. Okay? Never has it been raised about the impact this development creates on the surrounding property owners, and I think that's wrong in the whole city process, because high-density developments like this definitely have an impact on us adjoining property owners. okay? Even though we were led to believe by the property owners and the developers originally that there was only going to be somewhere between 45 and 60 units here. Now it's escalated to 91. I still haven't opposed this development. But Perennial Favorites has been there for 30 years, okay? We're a 10-acre nursery, wholesale nursery. We do not have the public come to our place. We sell to other retail locations. We started, like I said, 30 years ago. It was just my wife and my children and my brother-in-law, Mike, kind of a backyard business. It's now a business that's a regional grower. We supply plants, over 2.14 million plants to 5 western states. Every one of those plants that goes out of our nursery has a sticker on it that says grown in Layton, Utah. It's a little advertising for the city here. But we have 43 full-time employees. We have 25 seasonal employees, and we have an annual payroll of about $1.8 million, gross sales of about $7 million. So you can see over the 30 years, we have built the business up. And I know that, you know, we were in a farming community. We knew that when the original landowners would pass away, that the children had no interest in farming, that this would go to development, most likely residential development. Understand that. Like I said, I have never opposed that. My concern is, and I would just like to state this for the council so that you understand the impact that these 11 lots are going to experience from us, okay? And that's been part of my concern that's been overlooked is, if I was living in one of these 11 homes, which has a 30-foot rear yard setback, which is about the width of this building here, okay? This room right here is about 30 feet. Okay, in that main driveway right there that's on the north side of our greenhouses, there are over 30 fans, exhaust fans, that run during the day. They create noise from as soon as the sun comes up, basically, until the sun goes down. They make noise. Okay, not a lot of noise, but it's consistent noise. When those exhaust fans turn off, there are what are called horizontal airflow fans within the greenhouse to keep the temperatures even within the greenhouses. They run all night long. Okay. During the winter time, we use growing lights, and we use these lights in all of the greenhouses to change the photo period of the plants. Okay, it's called photoperiodics. Okay, when you change the ratio of daylight and darkness, it affects the way the plants grow. And we have to have them. This is something that we have to have for our operation to be successful. Okay, there's going to be light flooding over that 6 foot tall, which is about this tall, 6 foot tall fence to those residents right there. They're going to be 2-story residents, so they're going to have lights. And these lights are on in the wintertime. So from October to March, these lights are on all night long right there. Okay. Now there's also heater noises from these greenhouses right there. Whenever the heaters turn on, there's quite a roar of the fans for the heaters to turn on. That is also going to be experienced by these 11 residents right there. Now that driveway that goes along the north there is our main driveway approach. It's how we access all of those greenhouses for putting plants into the greenhouses, for taking plants out of the greenhouses. There are vehicles that run up and down that driveway, especially in the spring months, you know, March through June. There are vehicles running up and down that corridor right there, probably every 2 or 3 minutes for 12 to 15 hours a day. Okay. The rest of the year, there are still vehicles going up and down that corridor, not quite to that extent. But the residents are going to hear those vehicles going up and down that corridor right there. So I think that's an impact on them. I really do. And I don't think they're going to really enjoy their outdoor. Of course, in their houses, they're going to be fine probably. But if they're out in their backyard, they're going to hear us all the time. And that's going to make for some unhappy residents, unhappy people that have purchased this. And oftentimes when they're unhappy, they try to change things, and I worry about the impact they're going to have on our operations there. I really do. Complaints to the city or whatever it might be. So that's kind of like my concern in a nutshell right there. Yes, we talked about having some kind of a walking path back there to try to push those homes and push that to mitigate the noises from our business, because we're not a traditional agricultural business. Yeah, that didn't work out. We had also proposed, well, possibly they could go with a taller fence, like an 8-foot masonry fence, to also kind of block some of that noise, some of the light, some of the sound. That was also shot down. But those are my concerns right there. And I just wish that somebody in the city would consider the impacts that developments have on the neighbors, the surrounding property owners a little bit, at least give us some voice in the discussion. The only voice we've had was at the Planning Commission meeting. The comment was made to be by Mr. Wilkinson that we don't involve neighboring property owners when there's a development coming in. You know, they have that opportunity to make their opinions heard at the meetings, the Planning Commission meetings, the City Council meetings. That's too late. Those decisions have already been made before we can get up and make those comments or before there's any interaction with us. Staff have seen the plans from the proposed developer. They've commented on them. They've, you know, tweaked them a little bit here and there. They've already formed their opinion and their recommendation to Planning Commission, City Council. We have not had any input, I guess, whatsoever when that process has already been completed. Yes, we have the opportunity to stand up at the Planning Commission. We do, but I think by then the door's closed and it's too late. So that's really all that I have to say. If there's any questions from any of you, go ahead. If not, I'll sit down and shut up.
Preston, I'm going to ask you, because I know you've got experience within the city here, especially, and thank you for your past service on the Planning Commission, but you know we don't really have, I mean, the developer has the opportunity to develop the property, but the fact that we went over the agreement that any of those adjacent properties, it's going to be on the deed. So that means the first owner or the 10th owner of that home is going to be notified
I understand that.
that there is a nuisance here and that
Right.
they agree to be to that. So I guess I just want you to know that I feel good that that's taken place so that we have a leg to stand on as well. Just like you said, you wanted to go on the record. Well, we can go on the record saying it was, you knew that when you purchased your home.
We can, and I agree with you, Mayor. I do, and we're grateful that that's on there, that wording's on there, and it's even been expanded a little bit. But you still have to feel for the people that are going to buy there, not knowing really what they're getting into. Where maybe with just a little bit of mitigation, maybe a lot of that intrusion into their backyards could be mitigated a little bit, and that's my concern right there too. We need to take those 11 residents, those 11 families into consideration, not just the impact it might have on perennial favorites in the future of our business.
Well, I commend you on your operation and the fact that you've gone the way you have, and I appreciate what you've done for Layton because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of flowers out there that come from this city, and it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you and the 45 seasonal folks as well, plus additional family members. So thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Hi, Court Cox at 243 South, 3200 West. I just want to express my concerns on the dog park area. So I live just on the south side of that new road going in from 3200. And I'm just concerned on the dog park area. It seems like kind of a weird spot to squeeze that in. And I guess my biggest concern is the noise from that. You get multiple dogs in there and if they don't get along, they're going to bark. I mean, right now, the home that's currently there, they have a couple of dogs. And every time I go in my backyard, they just woof, 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 just bark like crazy. And I don't even own a dog. And I'm just concerned at how many dogs are going to be using that and what that's going to turn into. Will it be cleaned up properly? Will there be smells from it? That type of stuff. So that's my biggest concern there. But I do just want to say that I second all the concerns that Preston just spoke about the business. I've worked there since I was 10 and want to continue working there and just don't want any problems with the neighbors or anything like that. We don't want to have to change our operations or what we're doing. Because that could be a concern for the future of our business. So other than that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you want us to talk now or after? What's the best way to do this?
Well, my advice for anybody here is I'd just as soon have you addressed us once.
As the applicant, okay.
I know you're the developer, but certainly we also have some property owners, and I know that Mr. Cox has already been up, and I don't want to get into this deliberate debate back and forth, because that's really not what this is. But certainly, we want to hear you. We want to hear your opinions. Maybe what I'd do is, let me see if anybody else wants to speak, and then that way you can kind of address it all.
Mayor and council members, Mike Stevenson at 321 South, 3200 West. I live 2 houses south of Courtney, and I'm concerned about that dog park. You know, I remember in one of our previous meetings when we were talking about the walkway on the south side of those homes as a buffer for the greenhouses, a comment was made by someone that might have been a developer that open space is too far away for the people on the north side of the development to use. And so here's the dog park, the furthest away of anybody in that whole park that you could put. Why isn't it in the middle where everybody can get closer access to it? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then the other comment that hasn't, not with the development, but with 3,200. I counted 40 trucks 3 days ago hauling dirt. And I made the suggestion, I think 2 weeks ago, use 2,700, that new road. And I think the chairman of the commission said, well, it's not done yet. They need another surface on it. That road has been painted for the last 30 days. And so I just don't understand the logic of having trucks go down 2,200 and 3,200 to the exact location where the end of 2,700 is dumping out on. And here's these trucks going down 3,200 now past the grade school. Mm-hmm. And I think there's signs there that says no trucks over a certain limit. They're going down 2,200 and there's a grade school crossing there. And I just think that with a little bit of foresight, in fact, I got a question for you council members. When's the last time any of you have been down West Gentile to 3,200 and 2,200? When's the last time?
Every night.
Every night. Some of you live down there.
Yeah.
Well, I was 5 minutes late getting here because I was stopped on Gentile with a freight train. And then right behind that was the front runner, which I'm thankful for both of them. But we need an overpass, and I've made a comment before about some history of that, so I won't get into that. But take a look at that dog park. That just seems like the most illogical place to have a dog park in a subdivision that's going to have 91 families using that park if they have dogs. It just, for me, it doesn't make any sense at all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Did you want to ask him a question? Who do you want to ask?
I wanted to ask a question before the developer gets up, so we can address it when he's here.
Oh, okay, sure. So, Councilmember Bettina Smith Edmondson is going to ask a question so that you would be able to address it when we have you come up. And this goes to the developer.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of questions that I would like for you to address. One, it was stated that the original lot design or plans was 50 to 60 units, and now we know that it's at 91. We know that the 11 units here on the south side, I believe that is, are the ones that are of the most concern to the adjacent owner. There was also discussion about the dog park. I understand the value in having 11 additional lots on that side, but I would like you to address if there was ever discussion to use that space perhaps for the dog park or for some other open space that was not necessarily filled with lots that could potentially mitigate some of the concerns. Again, I understand fiscally that does cut, but if initially we were looking at 50, 60, whatever the number was, and now it's at 91, if that was a potential, those are my two questions.
Okay, so I'll bring it back. So if anybody else would like to, anybody in the audience? would still like to bring up a concern, certainly we'll hear. And then while you're thinking about that, I'm going to have Councilmember Moore state his.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Gary. So you have the statement on the plat, and then you have the extra information for the 11 lots. And Mr. Cox is talking about you'll have owners possibly upset at the city for allowing this to happen. And walk me through, someone gets really, really upset and comes to the city and you say, well, you signed right here and it says this, you agreed to that. Like, well, we don't like that. So we're gonna escalate. What happens then? What's the process then? That's a legal process, I would assume, or is it maybe walk us through that?
Yeah, thank you.
Very hypothetical, I know.
Yeah, no, it's a reasonable question. What would happen at that point? There's a section of state law that I sent, I think, out to each of you. And that section of state law was passed in 2019. That 2019 passage of state law indicates that no matter what we do by ordinance or what other state statutes do, that agricultural uses that are used reasonably, and there's a presumption in their favor that if they exist, they're running reasonably, you'd have to demonstrate that they were doing something really out of the ordinary for them not to fit into that category, but they are exempt from any type of accusations regarding nuisance. That's particularly true where people move into a neighborhood. We had one of our new attorneys move into a neighborhood in Clearfield, and he bought a house there, and right behind the house is a Lowe's, and the Lowe's has a light in the back for deliveries and that type of thing. And the presumption is if you move into a neighborhood, that you will do your homework, that you will look at what's behind you. Some people don't, I recognize that, but state law gives a double protection to agricultural uses beyond just what a normal nuisance would be. For example, Lowe's is not an agricultural use, so probably there may be something they can do about the light. But in this situation, these people moving in with notification on their deeds, notification on the plat, and then moving in and seeing it there would all be mitigating factors that would prevent them from being able to really take any action against the property owner, the ag property owner. Does that help, or is that okay?
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this topic? Okay, if not, I'll go ahead and let the developer come up and you can answer some of the questions and concerns that were brought up.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time. Is it okay if I maybe take a big picture perspective for just a second and then come back and address some of the detailed questions that we've got? Okay. I've been working here in Layton City for a long, long time, and I would guess that maybe some of you were involved certainly Dave was involved on the general plan, the Layton Forward. We were heavily involved in that. So if you were involved in that process, you will know Brandon Rippian was like there through all of that. Gary was there through all of that. It took forever. There was a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort that went into that. I'm not a Layton City resident, but at the time I was working for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints Real Estate Department, and so we were heavily involved in that process and saw it as a landowner. And it was incredible how much time the Wasatch Front Regional Council grants, and consultants, it was an impressive effort. The outreach, the public outreach ad nauseum, the surveys, I couldn't believe how much effort went into this. And I guess if there's one city that can stand behind their general plan to say that's what we believe in because we've done our homework, it's Layton City. And I can't say enough great things about that plan. I think you tried to balance the farming, agricultural, that I know a lot of you are involved in and have history in, and it's a big part of Layton's cultural heritage. It's just impressive how much time and effort went into that. And at the same time, staff has done a tremendous job to put ordinances in place that say, hey, this is how we preserve that heritage while balancing development and the needs that we have for affordability and the other things that we have. And so as I look at this from a big picture perspective, this area will not look like this in 10 years. I couldn't have said that 10 years ago because it looks fairly similar despite all the development that's been talked about. This area will look totally different in 10 years. When you have that West Davis corridor that comes through there and the frontage roads that eventually tie into 3200 West, this will be a different place. And that's change, and that's hard. And I get that. And I cannot fault Preston at all for saying, hey, I'm concerned about this and the squeeze that it's going to have and the impact and the traffic and all of these things. So we by no means are trying to make light of Preston's concerns and plight. We're trying to say we're balancing what Layton City has seen in their vision and their perspective, and we're trying to marry that with some of the concerns that we've heard from those adjacent residents. We've tried to be sensitive. Now, you can't win, in a compromise. You can't please everybody. But the fact that there's not 30, 40, 50 people, angry residents here in this room, to me, says a lot. We've tried to accommodate the concerns and address those things as we've gone through, and Layton City's done a great job to give us that guidance and direction. Specifically, I guess I'll jump down to the specific questions. Let me just check my notes and make sure there wasn't anything else I wanted to say. And I guess the only other thought that I'll just mention is probably, 50% of this conversation, Dave brought it up a little earlier. He said, mitigation, what does that mean? And it's not mitigation. The mitigation isn't coming from Preston's impacts, Preston Cox impacts on us, right? It's the opposite. So we spent 50% of the pre-meeting and the planning commission, the planning commission meetings talking about how do we minimize developments happening, homes will be built there. How do we minimize the impact that we will have on Preston? So the mitigation goes from us to Preston, not vice versa. I think that was your question in the earlier meeting. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to understand that. We've talked to them about ideas, and we've tried to marry that with what the city has been interested in pursuing, which is avoiding, narrow trails through there with two fences, and does that really help make a difference? Ultimately, we've tried to do a few things here. So we've tried to, anyway, we've talked about all of these things. So with that being said, the specific questions that were asked was, number one, okay, so the 50 to 60 units, I don't know, to answer your question, I'm not sure where that came from. So I think Preston has referenced that a few times. I'm not sure exactly where that's come from. So as opposed to just kind of assuming things, I don't want to assume. I think that's been involved in conversations that have maybe happened over the time that Preston has been communicating with the property owner. But from our perspective, Layton City's vision, and it could have been before Layton Forward was even done, and that could be referencing things that happened a long, long time ago. I don't know. It could be referencing things that when Preston was on the Planning Commission, I really don't know where that's come from. So as opposed to maybe guess or hypothetically speak to that, I guess all I can say is we've looked at what the general plan says, and we are absolutely consistent with that general plan. We feel like we've been, as you look at what Layton City visions for that interchange on 2700 West, that's Layton City's last chance to say, hey, we've got some commercial opportunity. And so if you look at a buffer on 2700 West, those townhomes are a great buffer to, and then smaller lot single family are a good buffer to some of the larger lot residential as property develops. So from our perspective, that's a use that in good planning practices and measures makes a lot of sense from our perspective. As opposed to guessing, and I'd be happy to address Preston's specific questions if he brought those up. I don't know where that number came from. So I don't know if that's satisfactory to you or what. But the other question that you asked, I think if I understood, is the concern of those 11 residents that are bordering Preston's property to the south. Again, what we've tried to do there is create additional space that we've put in the backs of people's lots. We have been open to considering some open space back there. We've always had lots on the south side of that road. We had to go and acquire that parcel to provide connection to 3200 West, which was a big expense to us, the one that we didn't anticipate. We thought we'd be able to kind of weave back down and through and end up on Gentile Street. But in reality, Layton City said, look, from a utility perspective, if you want to develop this property, we have to go through somewhere on 3200 West. And so that was a big step for us, a big financial commitment for us to make that we weren't anticipating. And so we went and bought that property to provide that access and those utilities there. And it was, it was a big ask from our perspective, and something that was required in our annexation agreement. And so something that we did to try to make all of this work. But back to your question, there were elements of open space in there, and as we kind of looked at the plan, we thought, potentially doing a trail back there maybe wasn't as supportive of the city and their objective to kind of consolidate that open space. And so we abandoned that and just said, we're going to make those lots a little bit deeper and try to put those in the backs of people's lots and create that solid fence. Preston talked about several things: roads, lights, dust, smells. We've tried to put those in deed restrictions to notify those property owners, as has been talked about at length here. And I guess I just, there are street lights in other places in the city. Are those lights more or less than the street lights? I haven't done a lumens test to know. My guess is they're not that much different. In terms of the road impacts and the sounds, my guess is that's not much different than the road. 245 South there, that road is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I guess I'm sympathetic to some of Preston's concerns, but I also want to kind of gauge that with a healthy dose of what are those impacts and have we appropriately mitigated for those? And so that's been our effort, to try to understand what those are and to mitigate those through deed restrictions, providing more space in the backyards. And those residents, if it's a big enough concern, I think they can, they can put screening with vegetative screening. They can put blinds in their back windows. There's a lot of things that they can do. And frankly, I don't know about you. I have 7 kids. We love the exhaust fans in our bathrooms because it deadens the sound. So we do that on a regular basis. So maybe those exhaust fans won't be as bad as Preston's talking about in terms of the impact that it will have on some of those residents. And if they do, sound makers and all of that, we have those in each of our kids' bedrooms. So for what it's worth. Those are the questions that I think I heard. The last one was the dog park. It was a question that was brought up. Why is the dog park located where it is? From our perspective, we've built several of those dog parks, and in our experience, the dog parks that have done extremely well have been long and linear. I guess there's enough space to provide for dogs to run around. And so you can do that through a few different ways. Smaller, kind of isolated parks where you can't throw a ball don't do as well. So the ones that we found do well are either massive, which we didn't have the space to do because we wanted the open space for the residents, not just isolated to the dog park. And so those larger open spaces that you see there were reserved for those uses. This area, the next best alternative, if it's not just a massive dog park, then it's a long linear dog park where you can throw a ball. And anyway, that's what we found works the best from having built several of these. We have one in West Weber that's incredibly popular, and so we wanted it to be large enough that was meaningful, but not too small that it didn't mean anything. We could have carved out a corner somewhere in parcels A or B, but we felt like that long linear space made a lot of sense from that perspective. We do have fencing there to provide some screening from some of the neighboring property owners, but I guess those were the questions that I heard, and I'd be happy to address any other questions or concerns that the council has.
I'm going to ask you one quick question,
Sure.
just because I know the dog park is a concern there, and the fact that, we have small dog syndrome. And they're the ones that usually instigate any of the issues. Is any of that fenced off for just the small dog area? So that you can mitigate some of the concerns there?
No, we just have one area right now. We in our large dog park in South Weber, we do have 2 areas. In this one, we felt like it wasn't quite large enough to separate, but it's definitely something that we might consider doing if that's something that the residents or the HOA wants. It's kind of a funny thing, Mayor, because that dog park will be used by, I would guess, our 91 residents, who are those of them that have dogs. But I would guess that this will become kind of a regional gathering place for folks with dogs. And so it's kind of a bitter pill that we swallow as the developer, because it's not a public park, right? It's not owned by the city. We're maintaining that. We'll take care of that. Our residents will have a say on what gets built, and if they wanted to add a divider fence up there for small dogs, they will ultimately have full discretion on what gets built, like after it's built and turned over to the HOA. So I would say that a lot of that will be resident driven, but unless Layton City wants to take it over, we'd be happy to give it to you, and then you can do whatever you'd want to it. But other than that, that's kind of how we've looked at that. So.
Yeah, nice try.
Nice try. I thought I'd try.
Yeah, I know. But I do know it's a void that you're fulfilling in the city. I know that, if there's one thing that we get requests often, and that is dog parks. So you're seeing more and more developers bring these into their development, and I think that's a good solution, and I appreciate you, considering that. So I'm going to bring it back to the council because did anybody else have any additional questions for the developer?
I do have a question, but it's for Gary.
Okay.
Kind of to Mr. Cox's point about how these kind of situations get out of the station and they're going. I mean, the developer here mentions some major investment that were made based on an annexation agreement that hasn't even been adopted yet. And so can you speak to kind of the process of that? I mean, let's say, I'm just saying as a hypothetical, we say, no, we're not doing this. We're not allowing this to move forward. Now the developer's out, the cost to purchase that additional piece with the understanding that staff was directing that this is something that's going to be according to the general plan, but we decide we don't want to do it. So I just would maybe like some clarification about exactly the scope of our decision-making here and whether we, deciding one way or another, potentially put the city at a potential legal risk.
So, of course, we've talked before about how annexation is probably the most general. You know, your reasons for annexing or not annexing are entirely up to you, and that's the reason the developer tries to work with staff to try and come up with something that he thinks will work. Oftentimes, the developer will invest money in a plan just to make sure that they can do the things that the city might require them to do, such as the second access. But does it impose on you any obligation one way or another? Not at the annexation phase. The rezone phase is very similar. You've got a rational basis for the decisions you made. The strongest rational basis is your general plan. And so if it's consistent with your general plan, that's a good reason for rezoning. But at the same time, you have a lot of discretion there as well. So no obligation is imposed on you because of something the developer actually did. The imposition would be at a time when you sign a development agreement or an annexation agreement with the developer. And that's usually approved at the same time if there's a need for it as the development or the annexation.
So the developer can't impose any sort of reliance damages on us?
Not for the annexation or rezone. The developer generally, if you don't like what you see, the developer generally will go back and try and put together what you like to try and complete it. And obviously, there's a lot of commitment here, and the developer is interested in and believes that it can be done, that he can come to a conclusion that would be acceptable to the city. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have made the investment. But the investment is the developer's risk always. So, except when you get down to the subdivision part, and that's a little different administrative decision, right?
Can I just make one quick comment? Or you still?
Let me see if the council has any more questions for the developer at this point. Anybody else have any?
Okay, well, maybe I'll make two quick comments. One is, sir, you have impugned my reputation by saying where did I come up with this 45 to 60 lot number. Gary Jenkins and your buddy right behind him, Jake, told me that about a year ago when we sat down with them. So I'm not imagining this. You can ask the two of them.
I didn't claim that you were.
Yes, you were. The other question or the other statement I have to make is the dog park again. Here again, it's all about, oh yeah, this adds value to the development. Total disregard to the Allred family that their bedroom is 8 feet away from the dog park. You know, if this is a dog park for the betterment of the development, it ought to be in the middle of the development where it's more accessible to the residents of said development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've pretty well heard from everyone. Is anybody else, council, are you clear to make some action here? Oh, hang on. Tyson, yeah, if you have a question, go ahead. We're in the deliberation stage, you guys. You need to be comfortable with this.
I don't know if I'm... We're creating a dog park, which is fine for the people that live there. But as you mentioned, it's going to become a regional dog park. Now, where are we going to put them guys? You know, parking is going to be an issue. I mean, if we build something that draws people that don't live there, you know, it's kind of like Ellison Park, that we have a soccer tournament and they're parking all in the red zones because there's nowhere to park. I mean, close, there is, but anyway, so that's just something it was in my mind. I wasn't going to say anything, but, you know, with the advent of that, everything else I see is fine. That's my opinion. But that one, I just see a few problems arising because you don't have control of who visits, you know, who wants to.
Being on the outer perimeter like that?
Yeah, and especially, you know, I think you'd have HOA problems in the middle of it too. I mean, no matter where you put it, you're going to have people that don't, quote, unquote, haven't paid for it, so.
Okay. Councilman Roberts, did you have a concern or a question?
Yeah, I've wrestled with this for a couple days. Many of you know I'm a farmer, and I've worked 20 plus years in different agricultural organizations working on protections for farmers. Not only the farmers that are still farming, but those that decide that it's time to sell. You know, most farms end up that way. That's what we hear. And I've been going over the last couple of days of all of the protections, you know, that we've mentioned, the nuisance ordinances. When someone buys a home or builds a home, as the mayor said, now, or buys the home again 10 years from now, all of these protections are in place for that farm or for that agriculture operation. And I'll tell you, 2 hours ago, I was comfortable with that. Preston talking about the greenhouses has reminded me of the 25 plus years I worked in the nursery business. And greenhouses are not the same as a hayfield. And they're not, you know, in a hayfield or in a cornfield, you might get dust from the operation, not from from wind or anything. You might get dust a couple times a year, you know, a couple times a month if it's a hayfield, lights in your window for one night a month or every 2 months. A greenhouse is different, and I have grave concerns about putting residents of this city within 30 feet of that. So an hour ago, I might have made a different decision, but right now, for that reason, I can't support this.
This might be a question for you, Chad. Now, I'm guessing that the developer received a density bonus for the dog park down there as an open space area. Is that correct? I'll wait for you to get to the microphone there.
Thank you. Yes, there was a density bonus. It's not specific to a dog park, though.
Right.
It's related to the overall open space. So there's a square footage and an amenity. Certainly, there could be other options for amenities that could be considered there that
Okay.
would also provide the same type of density bonus.
Right. And I guess that, and thank you, because I want to, the plan, from my understanding, looks good. I do have concerns about the dog park, mostly because of for the reasons mentioned and for the use and for the potential impacts on the surrounding areas. And if that was just not a dog park, if that was just open space, they still get the density bonus. They can still build as many lots as they're wanting to undertake. But we take out the idea that we build a community dog park in the middle of a neighborhood that becomes some community place for other people to come and visit. So I actually think that the plan is good. I'm not sure we can mitigate on those. Thank you, Chad. I'm not sure, from my understanding, I don't know if I can mitigate. We can mitigate enough on those south lots. I mean, Mr. Cox mentioned the 8-foot masonry fence, but I'm not sure there's still 2 stories, so I don't know what another 2 feet's really going to do in terms of mitigating any of that. I'm not a big fan of the 2 fenced idea for the safety reasons we talked about with potential, and I'm not sure about that, but I would feel much more comfortable with this, and I think I would have my full support if we could figure out something to do with the dog park to keep it open space. But I don't want to impose that kind of use on that surrounding area. I don't think it's worth the effort. So that's where I'm at on it.
Okay, anyone else? If not, I'll look for action, council, on this particular item.
Say one more thing about the dog park specifically before.
Sure.
Is that okay? Sorry.
Yes, come on up.
I would hate for there to be votes against the project just because of the dog park. I guess that would be my concern. And with 2 council members expressing concern, I guess to Dave's concern, I just wanted to provide information and then say we're good either way. So if the concern or if the motion was to approve the project minus the dog park, we would be fully supportive of that. So I would hate to lose a few votes as a result of that. But just to Dave's point or kind of parking questions, if you look at the distance, just that leg, essentially the depth of that lot before our community begins, if I had a laser pointer, I'd point to it. It's 240 some odd feet. Do you guys know where I'm pointing?
Yeah, from 3,200 going east.
Before our first lot, before lot 21.
To the first lot that's to the south there.
That's right.
That backs up to the perennials.
That's right. So that distance right there is 240, let's see, I had it here just a second ago, 264 feet. So usually the parking depth needed for a parking space is about 20 feet, right? As you parallel park, you need about 20 feet for a parking spot. So if you divide that 264 by 20, you get 12.3 stalls. And those 12.3 stalls, again, that wouldn't assume that you're kind of bleeding over to the west, I guess in the up direction on the map there. You could bleed over a little bit because that would be somebody's lot that you could park next to. And there's no driveways along there. And you could also park on the other side of the street. So you'd have 12 stalls on the one side, 12 stalls on the other for a total of 24 stalls. So to me, that's a considerable amount of parking. And then you'd also have parking along 3200 West, which I know would really frustrate the Coxes because that's right in front of their home. But there's obviously also, there would be impacts on 3200 West. And you could allow parking on both sides of that street if it was something that the city wanted. Alternatively, we could make that not publicly available. You can put a key fob on there like I have, like people have for their community pools. You put a little key fob on there so it would only be these 91 residents that could use it unless somebody threw their dog over and jumped over the 5-foot fence, which I could frankly see happening. But that's another alternative, is that if this were to be something that the city wanted, I guess we're good either way. We would like to see the dog park. It makes sense for us. It's going to be an open space, to your point, Commissioner or Councilmember Bloxham. It's going to be an open space anyway, either way. But I get, if it's an impact on the adjacent residents, I can understand and appreciate that as well. So if the motion is made to approve this without the dog park, we would be fully supportive of that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Morris?
No, I have a question for Chad then, just about the open space. If it's not an amenity, then, one of the reasons that the ordinance was changed, the PRUD ordinance, was to have the open space be not between homes, and this seems like it would be a wasted open space. It's open space, yes, but not, what are you going to do there? Yeah, well, it's just decorative at that point. And so I'm not sure, does it still count?
This is part of a larger amenity package for sure. I think the dog park is something that was proposed as part of that amenities. You've got other amenities, the playground, the pickleball court, the various pavilions and benches that are around. And maybe that the council feels that there's another amenity that could go there to replace that dog park. I think the space is going to be there because of the configuration of the parcel. So it would seem that it would need to have some type of treatment, whether it's a dog park or open space with some other amenity there. Certainly understand the impacts from, concern about those impacts from the dog park, though. Those are definitely real. And if there's another amenity that the council felt like they wanted to see there, or, it is or if you felt like the amenities that they were proposing in other places were sufficient, that's really up to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, once again, I'll bring it back to the council.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2245, Ordinance 2216, and Ordinance 2217 with the condition that the dog park portion of the Resolution 2245, is that right, Gary? Is that where the dog park is? That be removed?
I'll second.
Now, typically on a public hearing, we could close this and deal with them individually, but I think tonight we'll just go ahead and leave the public hearing open. And I know that I've done that in the past, so I'm not trying to do that to trip anybody up. We're going to leave all the public hearing open for all items. However, on this item, we will go ahead and take action, and that would close basically any more discussion regarding this item. So it's been moved in second that we approve the annexation agreement. And with that, I'll take a roll call vote. I'll start out with Councilmember Thomas, Mr. Birthday Boy.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Roberts.
No.
Okay. Councilmember Bloxham.
Aye.
Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Nay.
Okay. We have a vote of 2-3, which it does pass. So with that, just as a reminder, that is with the exclusion of the dog park or a different amenity in that area. Okay, so thank you everyone for the discussion and for the manner in which we was able to handle this item. I know it's been emotional for some of you, and I appreciate, and once again, we do hear and want to know that we want you to know that this council is very proactive and concerned and really do want to listen to all the comments before they make their decision. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number B, which is a general plan amendment. So Chad, you got to sit down for a minute, but you get to come back up now.
Mayor, could I just make sure that, to be clear, that was approval of all of the items, right? The resolutions and the ordinances and very good.
Yes, with the exception of the dog
With the
park.
exception of the dog park, yes.
Correct.
Verify for
I thought you did a good
for
job.
Kim.
You were clear. Okay, let's go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to turn some time over to Brandon Ripien, one of our planners. He's been very, very involved in this general plan amendment, has done all the heavy lifting on this, so I'm going to give him a chance to talk about this. It's a fairly specific amendment that we're making, not an entire change for our moderate income housing plan, but to address some requirements from the state. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Brandon.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Actually, let me go to the slides that we need. So during the 2022 legislative session, there were modifications made to Senate Bill 34, which required cities to provide moderate income housing. And Layton City, because of that bill, adopted a moderate income housing plan element in 2019 to meet the requirements of that Senate bill. In that element, we had several strategies that we listed as goals to meet the need for moderate income housing, as well as data to support those strategies that we were trying to accomplish. As I said, during the 2022 session, there were modifications made to Senate Bill 34, and those were made by House Bill 462. So House Bill 462 required specific 6 specific requirements. So the first one was to amend our general plan element to meet the additional requirements for House Bill 462. The House Bill 462 also gave cities options to adopt additional strategies. With those strategies, cities are required to adopt an implementation plan that has specific actions and timelines associated with each of those strategies. Cities that have a transit station, such as a front runner station, like Layton City, are required to have a station area plan. And because we do have a front runner station, we are required to have a minimum of 4 strategies. And one of those strategies has to be that we adopt a stationary plan by 2025. Also, because of the station, we are required to adopt at least, and I'll go to this next slide here. We're required to adopt either one of the following, either strategy G, strategy H, or strategy Q. So we're also required to adopt one of those as our strategies. We do have several strategies, as I stated, that we've adopted as part of our original moderate income housing plan. And so on the left, you can see the existing strategies that we have already been trying to implement, and those tie directly into the new strategies, so strategy G and strategy H. So a lot of the strategies that we already have meet or are matching the new strategies. One of the requirements for House Bill 462 is that we meet or match word for word the specific strategies. So as I stated before, we are required to have a minimum of 4 strategies. But in order for us to be considered what is called priority consideration for funding, we actually want to have at least 6 strategies so that we're able to apply for TIF funding or TTIF funding. And if we meet at least, or have at least 6 of those strategies, we will be able to be considered prioritized as far as receiving funding for transportation projects. Also, with the strategies that we are proposing to adopt, we will also submit a report to the Department of Workforce Services, as well as the ordinance and our updated amendment to the general plan. So by October 1st of 2022, we're required to submit our amendment and our report. The amendment will include the additional strategies as well as the implementation plan. And so that is why we're here before you right now, so that we have time to prepare the report to be submitted by October 1st. This is just this shows you a portion of the annual report that we will submit with the specific strategies, as well as the addendum that we will that we're hoping to have adopted this evening. Just as a note, the state with House Bill 462 allocated funding so that cities can, what am I trying to say? So that cities can hire a consultant to help with drafting a stationary plan. And so funding for technical planning assistance through the Transportation Land Use Connection grant program that Wasatch Front Regional Council administers will be available for cities to create a stationary plan. And that is all I have. But staff, on August 9th, 2022, the Planning Commission voted to unanimously, or voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to adopt the moderate income housing element addendum, and staff supports Planning Commission's recommendation. Any questions?
Council, any questions on this?
All right, thank you.
Did a good job. Yeah.
Thanks.
And especially several years ago with the original general plan. I mean,
You're welcome.
Mr. Nelson was absolutely right that, well, that isn't his name, but I mean, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, that was a lot of work. There were several of us that were to every meeting and involved.
Well, thank you.
Maybe,
Stevens Park, but.
maybe, yeah.
We didn't get it, did we?
Maybe
That's
you
okay.
can have Ogden catch up.
They need to, probably.
But anyway, thank you, Brandon, and you'll be missed.
No problem. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, this is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak on the general plan amendment.
Good.
Okay, you're welcome to step up.
It'll be short.
Thank you.
Just had to lay there and rest. Y'all know me, the Tom Tudor of Layton City, 1757 Gregory Drive. And what I want to submit, since I've been a law enforcement officer for
Hearing
Layton
is open already
over
on-
20 years, and went around and picked up everybody's dogs, and all the grandmas and the wives and the Hillfield people, they called me to find out that they could get rid of these loud noises of dogs. And now I see all of you getting my information of 20 years of also calling the dog catchers from where? Farmington. Yeah. But I had to load them down and do all that as a police officer. That's my job to the citizen of Layton.
Thank you,
Okay?
Tommy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate that past service.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't believe there's any more comments regarding the general plan amendment. So, council, we can go ahead and take action on item B if we'd like.
Weren't we going to leave that open? Chad?
No, it's the
This
next one.
I
Yeah.
apologize. Sorry.
That's okay. So just for clarification here, so when we do, we're going to go ahead and take action on item
Right.
B here. We'll also hear from item C. At the end of item C, we can close the overall public hearing with the exception of C. So we can have somebody say
Okay.
that we want to continue item C. Is that okay, Gary, if we go about that round, or do you want me to close it after this?
Well, no, go ahead and go.
Is that,
Sure.
that would work? Okay. All right. So now that
Well,
we've
then,
got
I make
clear
a
as mud.
motion that we accept the general plan amendment, ordinance 22-22.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt the general plan amendment. So with that, once again, I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start out with the birthday boy, Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Mr. 70, I should say. Okay, Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Aye.
Okay, Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloxham.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, we'll go ahead and go on then to item number C. And once again, Chad's going to present to us a municipal code amendment.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief. As we discussed in the work meeting, our recommendation to you tonight would be to open the public hearing for this item, take any comments that may come from the public, and then continue this to your next meeting. That'll give an opportunity for some of those that are reviewing this ordinance to give meaningful feedback and it'll also make some sense with some of the things that we're adopting as part of our engineering standards. There are things that are going to go hand in hand with these, so it makes some sense to have those on the same meeting anyway. With that being said, this is a proposed amendment to the private streets ordinance. in our code, we do allow for private streets. We've had some concerns that have come up over the last several years with private streets, and some concerns have been raised by residents that live in these private street communities, and also just some concerns with how these function. Predominantly, those concerns relate to two things, really. One is connections of public streets, using a private street to connect two or more of those public streets, which has created some problems and concerns. And then also related to gating of these private street communities. As a corollary issue to this, we do have some changes that we're making to our ordinance to try to make it a little more easy to administer, and also easy for those who are looking at this as part of their design of their subdivisions, that they can find the information a little easier. That's what's in front of you right at this point, is the table that we're proposing that would clarify and try to bring some of the text in our code into a table format to make it easier to administer and to understand. We've also made changes to our private street designations to make sure that, in the past, we've used private street interchangeably for a lot of different things. This is going to give us some names that go with those private streets to make sure we know which of those types of private street configurations we're talking about. In addition, we have standards related to gates, when those gates would be allowed, what the types of situations where gates would be allowed, and the types of criteria that they would be reviewed by. We have some of the criteria for when private minor streets can be used, and a very direct statement that says they can't be used to connect two or more public roads, as that has been an issue in the past. And then just some minor changes to PU and DE standards that relate to these private streets, in that those standards affect the design of a subdivision, especially those private subdivisions. One other thing is some setback regulations that help us to understand the minimum building-to-building separation, and to make sure that that doesn't exactly match the private streets, so we have some room for foundations and footings in those situations where we have rear-loaded units. We went into some additional detail in the work meeting. We'll have another opportunity to talk about this in the future. So that's where I'm going to stop my presentation for tonight. We are recommending for tonight that the council open the public hearing, take any public comment, and that you would continue this item to your next meeting, September 15th. Happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Council, do you have any questions, knowing that this is going to be a continuation? Okay. And there's none. Is there any public comment? Okay, with that, then, I will ask this to come back to the council. And, oh, excuse me. Sorry.
I don't have a comment. I'm ready to close the hearing.
Oh, sweet. Let's go.
I move that we close the public hearing with the exception of item C, ordinance 22-21. We'd like to continue that to the next council meeting, September 15th, 2022.
Perfect. And what recommendation? Oh, no, that is right. Perfect. Okay, so I just need a second.
I second.
Yay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, that pretty much concludes our council meeting for tonight. However, I do have a concern that was brought up tonight that I'd like to address real quick, like I know it's unfinished business. The fact regarding this new road that's been built out there on 2700, and the fact that we keep it closed. I know that question was asked before, and we got a very good reasoning why, in the fact that we don't want those heavy trucks ruining that new road. But the safety concern is definitely something we need to address. I did go out that. I did get a call earlier, and I went out and I witnessed it, and I saw where the school kids, that does create an issue. And I guess I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that road should be built to the standards of every other road. Why aren't we opening it, especially if it's striped?
So the use is one benefit of leaving it closed, but that's not the reason it's really closed. The reason it's closed is the road we still have land transfers and land swaps as recently as last meeting that we're doing. And until the city actually owns it, it's like a church building or anything else. Until you actually own it, you can't open it. And,
Okay.
And the request
That makes more sense.
Yeah, the request of the people we purchased it from, which is PRI, they would not like it open until such time as all those transactions are closed. And we're close. We're really close.
Okay.
Yeah, and I should note that, yeah, Steve has been negotiating that. and it is in their court. They're going through their process, and that's what's taking the time. But
Okay.
that's what it is.
All right. I knew there had to be a reason other than the trucks. Okay.
Just one unfinished business, Madam Mayor.
Okay, hold on, you guys. We have another unfinished business here.
Just a quick, I had a member of the community just texted me today and said there was a wrong way driver on Layton Parkway and mentioned that the turn arrows on the pavement on the parkway may need to be repainted. And I told her I would bring that up with the unfinished business.
Do you know where on the?
Yeah, I can. It's basically right off of I-15.
So it's at
right
the
on,
interchange.
Yeah, it's at
It
the
is.
interchange.
The spooey on top.
I think it's almost like every 2 years, those need to be painted. And believe me, this has been a pet peeve of mine, and I know it's the fact that we have to use water-based paint, which doesn't last as long, but yeah, that's a big concern. It really is.
I don't know if that probably wouldn't have prevented the
Wrong
wrong
way,
driver,
no, but-
that they said that was a corollary. So just pass on the information.
But no, you bring up a good point because that happens a lot. And I get it, but I don't know, maybe it's something we can address as far as the.
And under our agreement, we'll have to refer that to UDOT, obviously, but we'll get on it.
Okay, well, please do, and let them know that this is like an every 2 year process unless the state legislature can change and allow us to go back to oil base on an oil road. Sorry. Okay, council, I believe we can adjourn.
Can we, I make a motion that we adopt resolution adjournment. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for enduring